What's up, RotoGrinders? Dean here, Dean7904. That is the daily fantasy handle that hopefully is going to be a top of one of these big boy contests going down today, NFL DFS. It's the overreaction slate. It's week 2. It's the start of 2.5 plus hours of NFL DFS content, taking y'all straight to kickoff. Myself, Kirkwood, Bobby Gomes. We got the new dads club. I just listened to your podcast. I'm playing the role of JSU, I suppose. Your tournament takes podcast that drops, I believe, on Fridays. Dude, swap me in for JSU, and here we go. Bobby, how did week 1 go for you? Any major insights? Anything that's worth monitoring going forward, or we're just gonna it'll come up organically throughout the conversation in this show?
I think it'll come up organically. Week 1 wasn't the greatest for me. Chalk hitting like that is never going to be the greatest situation in terms of how I construct my teams. But imagine it was pretty good for you, Dean. I could see you having a good week last week.
That's like a nice way of you're saying you're a chalk donkey. That's basically what you're doing. I hear you. That's fair. And
wow, it's the second show from Bobby and already coming in hot like that. Wow.
I can read between the lines. I get it. And what's funny is that I did well on DK, did poorly on FanDuel, basically was a wash. But yeah, I should have done better because the chalk was really good, and I generally am more apt to embrace it, depending on if it's good chalk, bad chalk. Obviously, we'll have that conversation. But and I know, we could break the tie. Kirkwood, I know Bobby was a one-time creator, one of the most famous $1 million winners of all time. But Kirkwood, you win $1 million every single week, in cash games on Yahoo or something. I don't know. That's my understanding, at least. And
$1 million YSRPs.
Oh, you got all the YSRPs? I did turn some of those in last week. So did we already talked. We spoke previously this week. You had a successful week 1. I think Justin Jefferson, for whatever reason, wasn't terribly popular in Yahoo. I presume it was salary reasons and people just wanted to squeeze in other stuff. But he was your big separator. Congratulations on a positive week 1. How do you feel about week 2, where it's kind of, I don't want to say gross, but, we'll talk about quarterbacks and such. The quarterbacks are pretty rough. A lot of the best quarterbacks just aren't on this slate. They've either already played, Mahomes and Herbert. Herbert's just an absolute hero. Incredible what he did if you were betting on the Chargers. If you had the Chiefs, sorry. No Josh Allen as well. The 2 Monday night games, so just kind of a thinner slate, just 12 games. But, your thoughts as far as this slate. And I know I heard your podcast. You didn't seem terribly enthused about the quarterback options, and they are what they are. And here we are, week 2, and it's already kind of sort of somewhat ugly. It's thin
to win. Yeah. So I did have a good week, but I consider it a break-even week if you count all of my pack rippings from Rainmakers. And I can't even get rid of any of these cards. And who the hell has the time to you rip enough packs? You have to try to make so many damn lineups. And who has it's not easy to build the lineup. Who has the time? So I consider it a break even, but and it's because people paid up for CMC and they didn't have JJ. I faded CMC and had JJ. So that's all it took. Even when you're holding Kyle Pitts and Aaron Jones, didn't matter. But this week is a little bit rough for quarterbacks, which has already got me down. As of right now, I've got a lot of money on Daniel Jones.
Oh boy.
So, yeah. So it's going to be an interesting week for sure. And on top of that, I am just a beaten down man here. I know, the new fathers club here, but man, I was like, oh, it'll be great. It's football season. I have all week to do content lineups. Man, it's impossible.
I can just say, when you jumped on today to the show, you seemed a little flustered, and when you jumped on your tournament takes podcast, I believe the first thing you mentioned was your child peeing in your face multiple times this week. So there you go. Hopefully you didn't get peed in the face at least today. So today was better.
Not today. Nope. But he's got diaper rash. That's a whole. There's a lot of crying going on.
You know what? The day is young. You still might get peed. Metaphorically, my lineups might pee in my face. We'll see how that goes.
Is that when you get crapped on by a bird? It's supposed to be good luck. You ever hear that?
I've heard that before, but I think it's just something you tell yourself so you don't
that's
feel.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, that's really good luck.
I don't think that correlates. I don't buy it. Yeah. All right. Bobby, what say you? Give me the screenshot as far as a slate. And again, it's really just because it happened in week 1 doesn't mean it's automatically going to happen in week 2. And it's always like if you can sort of take week 1 and superimpose it on week 12. And it's like, well, weird stuff's going to happen in week 12 when you have like all the weeks prior. Like what? You can see the anomalies. You can't see them as easily when all you have is just week 1. So maybe some like things are just wrong and we don't know just yet. Did that make sense? Hopefully that made sense. Bobby, your take as far as how you're handling with that, as far as a tournament perspective, as far as firing at the Million Maker, I assume you want to take advantage of people overreacting to week 1 to some extent.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Overreaction week is always week 2. One of the things I think that is pretty sticky, and Cardi was the one just kind of regurgitating his take on the blitz, is that the pace of play, I think, is going to be for these new coaches in like situations like with the Giants in Carolina, for example. I think they're rating out number 1 in terms of pace, or just up there in terms of pace, like so many plays actually played in the game. I think that's something that you can kind of glean. Like this quarterback situation this week is extremely just decrepit, and I feel like I don't want to roster the Daniel Joneses or the Baker Mayfields, but Daniel Jones is a really good basically stealing in terms of like the projections I'm looking at. So he's someone that I'm interested in. Baker's, I don't know. I don't want to play him either. Like there's so many question marks, but like there's obviously reasons why you could play him with the pace being that high. Yeah, quarterback is just tough for me right now. So I'm trying to work through that. So hopefully on the show, you guys can help me out a little bit.
What's tricky is like, I like everybody else. We like quarterbacks that have legs. You have multiple routes, multiple ways to get there. And I just don't love the idea as the most popular quarterback this week, Derek Carr, and I understand why. He's cheap and he's got a great matchup against Arizona, who looked absolutely putrid. Granted, they were facing KC, but Carr feels like the guy that's most likely to go 303. But if he doesn't, he's not going to bail you out on the ground. But he is pretty cheap, especially on DK. He looks like the cash game play. And then the one guy, I guess there's a couple guys that have legs. Lamar Jackson, of course, against Miami. And that game, it's funny you mentioned that as far as Cardi's pace of play, because he's got that Miami-Baltimore game as the lowest amount of plays being played on the entire slate. 117, if you want to know kind of the bracket. 117 down low, 133.8 support Cardi in the blitz. It's definitely very useful. New Orleans and Tampa is the number 1 game on the board. It's interesting you mentioned Carolina and the Giants because that is number 2. 131. Lamar doesn't need that many plays. He can get there, doing some spectacular things pretty quickly. And on the other side, we can have, if you have Hill only needs 2 plays to get there. He can catch 2 70-yarders and we're good to go. So, yeah, it's just interesting how that is because Lamar is one of those guys I look spending up for, especially when the field's not great, but maybe he has a few limited plays, but I'm not freaking out about that. I'll throw it to you, Kirkwood, because, Carr is the guy. You already talked about Jones, and Jones is a game that should be playing faster, and his receivers are, find the one you trust. Good luck with that. I guess it's Saquon Barkley. But he's cheap, and, maybe there's not a big opportunity cost the quarterback today. I think that's kind of like one of the big things we're saying here.
Exactly. So first of all, like you said, the blitz has that as the second most plays on the week here. So obviously it didn't really matter how many plays they ran last week because they did absolutely nothing the first half when I'm talking about Daniel Jones, but started to get into a rhythm, does have some rushing upside, is cheap, most importantly, and allows me to fit some of these studs. Like I'm pretty high on Deebo Samuel this week. I can get him in, I can get Devontae, I can do a lot of things if I make it right. So I'm and I love Saquon. And then if I just pair them together, kind of for my one lineup on Yahoo, that's what I'm thinking right now. But man, I'm all over the place. Derek Carr never makes me feel good, but we got the Devontae Adams narrative going down, the grandparent narrative, narrative, huge narrative.
Alan was telling me about the other day. I wasn't aware of it. He enlightened me. Apparently, this is the very first game that his grandparents are going to be able to watch him in person. It's like I guess I don't know if they have issues with traveling, but they never could make it to a game in Green Bay. I don't know. That's peculiar, but all right. What is he going to get? 20 targets now instead of 17 because his grandparents are in the crowd?
I know. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But like, there's a lot. I mean, all these situations are kind of fragile. That could have been just the first week to get the chemistry going, and like now this could very easily be Waller. This could very easily be Renfro, Josh Jackson. I mean, Jacobs is getting some love. You know, and Bolden is not going to be, you know, vulturing a touchdown this week, most likely. And I think he's out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what's the latest news? So we have the only real latest news that's broken early this morning is kind of there's like a pitch count on DeAndre Swift, right?
I did not see that. Is that a Schefter bomb? Because
No, it wasn't Schefter.
Who is it?
I don't know. I came across it though.
Yeah, Swift was questionable all week, but it seems like he's good to go. Kamara is expected to be out, according to Schefter. Ingram expected to be available. It's like another really uncomfortable play. I think Taysom Hill's kind of interesting, where you can play him a tight end for what it's worth.
So that's my lineup. I have that, and then you get scared when you look at projections. That's the only thing is nobody's projecting this guy for anything.
I like it. I will. I mean, I like him. I'm going to run 150 today on Yahoo. And I think I'm going to have Taysom like at least 30% of my lineups. I'm taking a big stand on it. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but you know, you need some separators. And like, what is he going to be like? I'm afraid of like him not outscoring Freiermuth and it's like 3 catches for 30 yards, right? Like, who cares? It's tight end. We're shooting for a touchdown or two, and he's a guy that can get to legit touchdowns. Like,
I mean, how can you pass up Alberto Chalk, the 4th option on the Broncos offense?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, he's not. He's like 4.4 as a quarterback on DK. And I know we don't love quarterbacks, but I'm not playing Hill at quarterback on DK. But I'll play him a tight end, whether, you know, there's no Kelsey, whatever. There's Andrews, whatever. I'm fine shooting.
You know what it is?
What's that?
Big T just runs so freaking pure, and like that's the perfect name for his company because like Taysom Hill, like, you know what I mean? He's the Taysom guy.
He's not playing him on DK though. I can't speak for him, but
yeah, no, I wouldn't put it past him.
Pitch count for JJ Watt according to the chats. I don't know if there's a pitch count on Swift. Did you see that, Bobby? A pitch count on Swift? I missed that. If that was a thing,
I missed that too, but. I trust Kirky a little bit. Right?
Somebody posted. No, they're saying it in the Blitz chat is saying it.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I happen to miss that. Pittman is out, of course. Moore is still out for Arizona. We have some really ugly receiver cheap chalk on DK that we'll talk about as well. Do want to mention like 2+ hours here. You mentioned Big T. Big T won the MLB final for FanDuel. Congrats to him. 2nd place was SquirrelPatrol in like his 70th live final, whatever it was. He'll be on 11:30 today with Erik, and then later on crunch time. Well, I'm going to do my best to like answer some questions in chat, but if I don't, my bad. If you want to get your question in chat answered, make sure to be here for crunch time at 12:30. They're going to be they have some time set aside for questions knocking out in chat. You got TheLuuch, you got Kristi, who was also at that live final there for FanDuel, and Andre, who I believe was also there just hanging out. Millionaire winner as well, taking y'all up to lock. I don't want to spend too much time at quarterback. I mean, because I think it's the better conversation is for running back and receivers, and we don't really think it's a big opportunity cost. But Bobby, do you have an official take as far as Carr? And is that good chalk? Is that bad chalk? And the pivots, right? You can't just say that's bad chalk. You got to roster somebody else. Who are you pivoting to? Who are you going to be overweight as far as quarterbacks?
Yeah, so right now I don't have Carr in my player pool. If I was playing Carr, I'd probably be stacking him with Adams and then fading Saquon and Henderson just because you're accumulating so much ownership between Carr and Adams in that stack. I do just think that would be the way to go. But right now I'm not playing any Carr. I have, as of right now, currently constructed it's pretty disgusting, but I Carson Wentz is in my player pool. I have some Jared Goff, but I just took him out. Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Marcus Mariota, which is I don't know how I got there.
He could move. He's got some legs.
I don't think it's a bad move. And Mangone and me were talking about this last night. Like, he has the rushing equity, and you can see, like, in week 11, a lot of the cash game players, Dean included, may be playing some Marcus Mariota in cash. And you're getting him in a situation where this Rams team, they're going to blitz a lot. He can use his legs. Kyle Pitts, there's obviously recency bias towards rostering him. I don't mind going to Pitts in that game and stacking him with Mariota. And then Drake London, I know he's getting Jalen or should see some Jalen, but Jalen looked pretty dusty last week. So I think in tournaments, large field, Millie Maker, it's not the worst call.
Did you say Mariota's going to be played in cash?
In like week 11, I could see the cash game guys like playing Mariota in cash. I was just forecasting.
Who do they play week 11 if you look?
Gotcha. I thought you were saying like this week. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Oh, what you're saying when the cap is really, really tight, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, when the cap's tight later in the season, he'll be someone people are considering just because of the rushing equity, right? So we like rushing QBs in DraftKings formats. I just think he makes a little bit more sense than I think the public is kind of recognizing right now. DeAndre Swift, the official line here, the quote is expected to play Sunday with possible selective usage, which is a new one. I guess that's pitch count. It's sort of like a synonym of that. I don't know what that means, but that's what they're saying. Selective usage is the quote that I'm seeing on the interwebs. Kadarius Toney expected to play. Kittle expected not to play. Winston expected to go. Fournette with his hamstring expected to play as well. Like we said, Kamara likely out. Ingram likely in. Julio Jones is a game-time decision. He feels like he's always going to be a game-time decision. T. Higgins expected back from his concussion. J.K. Dobbins unlikely to go to start the season just yet, coming back from that, I believe was an ACL. C.J. Uzoma not expected to play. That changes everything. Ownership-wise here, Kirkwood, I'll pull up DK. You know, normally nothing gets too crazy as far as quarterbacks, but we do have 14% on Carr. This is large field projected for what it's worth, not single entry, not cash. Lamar Jackson at 10%, Stafford about 9%. And then there's Trey Lance, who, speaking of legs, he's got legs, and the arm is, we don't know, and we're not really sure how much he'll be pushed against Seattle. Maybe they just want to grind it, just run the ball against Seattle and get their W. Give an official Lance take because he is cheap enough, and I know a lot of people like him and betting on talent, and in theory he can break one as well on the ground. Where are you at as far as Lance here, Kirkwood? Yeah,
he's one of the few rushing QBs we have here today. So the thing is, so he was like the preseason darling, like all the offseason. This is going to be the big year for Trey Lance, drafted really high in season-long best balls. Bobby Best Ball can talk all about that. But anyways, and then, they play in a monsoon last week, and now everyone thinks he stinks, right? But did that game did it really show us anything? I don't think so. So this is the game. This is the game that shows us, whether what we get with them. But we've seen it. We saw the rushing upside that he had last season. He hasn't, really put everything together, but this could be the game. And Seattle should have a, really bad secondary. At least, they outperformed in their week 1 emotional game against Russ, but, their secondary probably got a little bit better with Jamal Adams going down, but they're just not projected to be very tough. So it's a great matchup. They're at home. You get the rushing upside. He's cheap. I get it. I like it. But yeah, I mean, I don't love it. I don't love anything though. So that's what we're stuck with. So I'm on board until we see what goes down today.
I'm going to have a little bit more of the field than on Jameis eating those W's in a dome there against Tampa. Tampa still could get a pass against them. Cardi's got a nice pace in that game as well, too. And the backfield's kind of a mess with New Orleans. We know, or we assume Kamara's going to be out. Ingram likely the top guy by default. Tony Jones is there. I think they signed Latavius Murray. I don't even know if he's going to play or dress, no clue. But it feels like a spot where I can see Winston, and he's got decent, targets. Thomas looked solid last week in the second half, getting a couple touchdowns. That's kind of like my one off the board, but again, it's not spectacular. Bobby, who's your biggest stand? You might have mentioned it, but who's your biggest stand as far as a quarterback in relation to the field?
So actually, I really liked Jameis last night. prior to Kamara being ruled out, and then when that situation kind of happened, I think Taysom becomes very dangerous because at the goal line, Jameis isn't going to be like, it's more of an opportunity for Taysom to come in and steal maybe a passing touchdown from Jameis. And like you said, yeah, it's the fastest paced game. It looked great. I like Landry. I think a lot of people are going to go to Michael Thomas, but Landry's someone I think that fits the scoring system with the stack with Jameis, and also Olave. A lot of people were on him last week. It's just tough now because you're throwing Taysom into the mix at the goal line, and it's the opportunity for Jameis to hit a ceiling that he might need is just a little bit more hindered, I would say. So I removed Jameis from my player pool.
Anything else as far as quarterbacks? We got to move on and talk about some running backs. You got anything else, Bobby, that's worth pointing out that you want to feature, or you want to just go to running backs?
So I think Joe Burrow's someone who, where everyone's rostering the Bengals defense, Joe Mixon. I think Joe Burrow to Chase, like wide receivers have those signature games in Dallas. I don't mind going to just to some Burrow. And I also think Cooper Rush might be a little bit more competent than the public's giving him credit for. So if they can score some points, Dallas, the issue is I think Dallas is going to try to run it as much as possible early. But I do like Burrow a little bit.
Who's your favorite run back in Dallas?
I like Zeke, but on the other side of that, like I think Noah Brown and CD are also in play. What did Amari Cooper had like 120 yards with Cooper Rush throwing him the football last season? Like Cooper Rush isn't some first-time backup. Like he's a quality NFL backup. So I don't know. I think these guys are in play. Dalton Schultz, I think he played 93% or like 97% of the snaps last week, running passes on pretty much every play, and he was another guy who was targeted pretty heavily for Cooper Rush in that previous game versus Minnesota. So I don't mind Schultz either.
Kirkwood, final thoughts as far as quarterbacks?
Yeah, so my interesting take here I think Tua is an interesting option here. So the thing with Tua is like, okay, he had like a pretty poor game week 1 against the Patriots in a game where they didn't really need to do much, frankly. And it's not about Tua, it's about his weapons, right? It's Waddle, it's Tyreek, it's Chase Edmonds. It's like he can get these little dump offs that can go 80 yards to the house. You know what I mean? From any one of those guys. Like he's got electric options now. I think this game is going to be very competitive, this Baltimore game, and I kind of expect it to be pretty good. So Tua is my guy. I told you I'm playing Daniel Jones. I'm probably gonna go down with that ship.
You playing him naked or with Barkley or with the receiver?
I'm playing him with I think I'm playing him with Barkley. I'm fine naked too. And someone pointed out in chat that I poop naked. I don't know. It's kind of weird comment.
I mean, isn't that how that works? I know. What's the alternative?
Anyway, so Tua I think is really interesting. I think he's going to be totally lost in the shuffle for GPPs. He's just easy to pair with Tyreek, with Waddle. So I like that. Yeah, but Daniel Jones is my guy. But let's move it on over to running back.
Yeah, I do want to say what's up to the chat. Kindly hit that like button, subscribe, turn on those notifications, hit all the buttons, hit all the things. We do appreciate that. Keeps the old proverbial lights on. Kirkwood, I'll let you fire off and start running back. Running back, we saw, again, surprises week 1. Akers, Henderson, as far as the usage. Henderson well outplayed him as far as snaps. Barkley looked incredible, looked like his form of a couple of years ago because, hey, he's healthy again. He got a big bump on FanDuel, the bump not as high on DK. So he's well positioned, again, Indianapolis in the absence of the receivers, Taylor, should be asked to do a ton today. He was asked to do a ton of week 1. Of course, week 1, they went in overtime, basically played 5 quarters, 30 plus touches or so. There's a lot of good stuff up top. That's basically, I'm looking at the chalk, right? It's Henderson, it's Barkley, depending on where you're shopping. Mixon seems a little bit underpriced on DK still for me. And God, Bobby mentioned Jacobs, and nobody likes Josh Jacobs, but he's like the guy that's going to ruin, potentially, all those Vegas stacks and just run like 2 or 3 touchdowns in from like the 3-yard line or something like that. Well, where are you at here, Kirkwood, as far as running backs?
I mean, Jacobs looked really good in the limited amount of work that he had. He doesn't have much competition this week so I get that play. It's always tough. They have a bunch of new weapons too, and everyone likes Devontae Adams, yada yada yada. But Saquon is number one for me. Like I said on the pod, he's 7,300. If he's what we think he is at this point, if he's fully back, if he's going to be healthy, he played 83% of the snaps, and that was in line last season when he was actually healthy in weeks. I think it was 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, one of those combos, where he was 84% of the snaps in the games that he was healthy. So he can do it in any game script. That's the great thing about him, right? Like he's an electric runner. He can bounce off big runs. Their offensive line is improved, but if they're trailing, he's a target monster, right? So, and he's only 7,300 on DraftKings. And so I think he's going to be like the 8,900 McCaffrey going forward. And I think it's probably after this week when he goes nuts again today. So this is your last chance. He's chalk, but I mean, if he is what you think he is, he's good chalk. Darrell Henderson is a different story. So a week ago, he was the backup running back according to everybody's projections, right? To Cam Akers, right? Everybody for the showdown slate had Cam Akers projected for a higher workload. So it's 1 week. It's also McVay. Like, are we sure we're just crowning this guy the back, or would it shock you if Akers got implemented in this week, or God knows, what I'm saying is, and not only that, like they have got Cooper Kupp who could steal all the touchdowns. Atlanta's good against the run, terrible against the pass. So I know his price is cheap. If he does get the workload that everyone's projecting, then yeah, he's a good play. But I think there could be it could go wrong pretty easily. What do you guys think about Henderson?
It's a tough fade for cash because he's cheap. It's the perfect spot. They're like 28 as far as the team total, 10-point favorites at home in a dome. Even if it's like a 55-45 split, him and Akers, he should still be fine, I think, in cash. Tournament's different conversation. I yield to Bobby. What are your thoughts as far as Henderson?
Yes, right now I'm currently under on Henderson just because I got on that Rams-Falcons game a little later last night. He came back in my player pool, or else I was pretty much full fading. So I think Mariota, obviously, the natural run back would be Henderson. At the running back position, like in that range, I think there are some guys that can compete with him. Just kind of thinking about it right now, Cordell Patterson, same game. Like I don't mind going to him. Chase Edmonds, he has like a pretty carved out role in that Miami Dolphins game, so I don't mind him. Damian Harris is another guy who I think in this grinded out game and with the Patriots and the Steelers, I think the Pats are really going to try to run the ball this week. So I don't mind going to him either. He's down at 5.2. There's a couple different guys in that Henderson range. Jacobs is just getting too chalky at this point. Like he's 16%. Like I just can't play that. Even though like it does look like he is the guy, but chalk Jacobs, I don't know. That's never
play Abdullah.
Well, Abdullah, yeah, no, that's fine. But I just don't see the game script that way. So it's just like Antonio Gibson, 6,200. I really like him. I think he's very interesting. He'll probably see a similar workload to last week, and then Zeke at 5,900. Just with everyone playing, none of these Cowboys are going to get ownership. Like they're going to be very low owned. I really don't mind Zeke right above Hendo. In the off the board recency bias, like leverage. So for me, I hate playing rookies early in the season in NFL. I really do. I'm just not one of the people that will do that. But I think with all the steam Dameon Pierce got over the summer from the best ball bros, from the public, just regular fantasy guys. And then last week he picked up steam as well. Like at 4,700, he's not going to be owned, and he got good coach speak with Lovie Smith. So I think that you could take a chance there. I currently have a decent amount of him, which I might have to scale back.
What was the coach speak? Because from what I saw is that Rex basically kicked him off the field. Like the veteran Rex Burkhead, basically took all the snaps in the second half. Unless I missed something, but what was the what they
saying? It was earlier in the week, and I think Lovey could have been massaging like the situation and just being peppered with questions about him because of basically fantasy players wanting to know what's the deal.
Yeah,
he said that they want to get him more involved, which is always dicey with a rookie because he could miss a block, he could miss an assignment, and then he's like in trouble. We've seen Penny really run well versus this Broncos defense. And I could see a similar result from Pierce. The other guy up top is Nick Chubb. Like, Nick Chubb is not going to be owned. Recency bias. Kareem Hunt does not get play. Well, he does get play. I'm sorry. Chubb does not get played because of Kareem Hunt's like touchdown equity in the red zone. But this is an unbelievable spot for Nick Chubb. Like, this Jets team isn't great. I know the total is a grind out game, but he's going to be very low owned, and I really like the leverage that you get him playing in.
Yeah, they both kind of squeeze each other, so it's sort of tricky. But it does feel more like a Chubb game than like a Hunt game, but you never really know, like you said. It's sort of tricky, and I think both of them kind of get their ownership pushed down. Hey, you mentioned Gibson's role, so you expect Gibson to be a pass catcher more so this year as opposed to last year? And then how real was the Javonte Williams, like 10 catches? I mean, we're not going to get 10 or 11, but do you think you're going to get 5 or 6, give or take? Or is that in the cards?
Yeah, we could get 5 or 6. I don't mind Javonte. He's another one, 6,500, that makes sense off the Henderson fade. I don't think he's going to see the same volume unless it is a situation where the Texans are a good team. Like, maybe they come out winning this game and it is Pierce, and then Javonte's involved in the passing game more. But yeah, I have my player pool. He's a little bit lower than, I don't know. I think I probably have the field currently, Javonte.
What if I told you there was a running back who played 76% of the snaps, had 96% of the rushing carries, led all running backs in routes last week, scored 21 fantasy points, over 21, without a touchdown, and is currently in a game where they're a 9-point favorite. And also he had 27 rushing attempts last week and 9 targets. Would that be something that might interest you?
Who is that guy?
Joe Mixon.
See, like, I don't hate Mixon. I think it's the great play, but his ownership, I think, has actually gone down from where I thought it was earlier in the week. But the Bengals D, I think, will just the correlation in general will get Mixon steamed up, right?
We're like 15% on DK, about 20% on FanDuel for Mixon for what it's worth. Go ahead, Kirkwood.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's enough to say. I mean, what else? What more can I even add to that? I mean, that's like everything you look for in a running back in talent, and Mixon's that guy. And I feel like he just never gets played enough in that range. So he's like falling right out of, like, people are going to play Fournette in a kind of a somewhat shaky situation, although the usage should be there for him, right? Because and I want to see if Julio looked awesome from a wide receiver last week. He really did. I want to see if he's going to play. I mean, we're stuck dealing with that. We have to wait for that news about his knee. But and it was funny too. Like he almost made this amazing catch in a great play, and comes up holding his back for a second, and I was like, oh, there, he's gone. But then he played through the rest of the game. So maybe this is a new Julio, the old Julio with his back. But I don't know. But I mean, he's like right outside of that range, and I think he's probably the nuts.
I need some official takes. Jeff Wilson, official take here, Bobby. What are we doing with this guy? You know, in theory, he's the number 1 running back, or maybe it's just Debo's the number 1 running back, or maybe it's the quarterback who's the number 1 running back. What do we do with Jeff Wilson? I thought he was going to be more popular. It seems like he's going to be. So it's kind of sort of makes him a little bit more interesting in tournaments. Yeah, his route is, he can run for 120 and 2. He's not a big pass catcher, my understanding. But yeah, what do you have as far as Wilson?
So I think they're going to lead on Debo a little bit more. But I understand why Wilson's popping, just because of the spread, and that they just don't. He's the running back there that would get the carries. It's just like you have 3 guys at the goal line that pretty much cap Wilson's ceiling. But he could get 2 TDs. I'm having a difficult time with that situation. Like, usually I would never play Trey Lance or Debo in the same lineup, but I think you can do it this week just because the ceilings on all these other quarterbacks probably aren't as high as they would be if we had regular guys on the slate like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, etc. So yeah, I don't know. Jeff Wilson, he falls in. I don't know. I'm not getting any Jeff Wilson right now, but I understand why people are gravitating towards him.
Kirkwood, anything to add to that? And then I want to throw Mark Ingram at you, another fun name to talk about.
Yeah, I'm all set with Jeff Wilson. I'm playing Debo. I'm extremely high on Debo.
I like
so
him too, yeah.
I look at Debo and like there's like this narrative, like, you know, some of the other great people in the industry, you know, are down on Debo, right? They're like, oh, he's wasting too much time rushing, but it's not really the case. He had a 33% target share last week. Now, granted, wasn't a huge passing game, but
like 15 passes or something.
But that's an elite target share number. And then you add in that he had 8 rushes for 52 rushing yards. He also gets the high value ones and is a red zone threat, you know, gets a ton of the red zone rushing opportunities. So like that's who I want. I want the electric guy. I don't want, like, they're always trying to make somebody work in San Francisco at the running back, and it just never does, really. So I mean, they do great as a team. It's just too hard for fantasy purposes. So I'm on Team Debo as opposed to Wilson. But other than that, who else is not going to get the love that they
We
deserve?
didn't really talk about CMC, which is important. I think it's noteworthy. Like, he's behind Taylor.
There's a lot of coach speak there too, that they got to get him much. You know, we've got to get the ball in his hands. McAdoo said, right, and this is the Ben McAdoo revenge game here.
Very eventual guy, you know.
Yeah,
a lot of people have issues playing CMC just because they don't want to play him in the same lineup as Barkley. But I think that plays this week, right? Like, it's another situation where the totals in these, like, the winning lineup isn't going to be as high scoring as last week. So
why not though? Like, right? Like, when CMC breaks the slate, what happens? He gets massive targets, right? And he breaks off some big runs, like, you know, and he gets touchdowns. And like, that's not going to stop. I get it, the correlation factor, right? Like, but Saquon is the exact same way. So like, these guys can both get there through the passing games in an up and down shootout too. So I don't mind playing them together. I don't think you have to put a rule in and say, you know, one
I'm with you. I'm playing both in the same lineups, same builds.
All right, going to move on and talk about receivers. Unless you got anything else, Bobby, we got to go because, you know, we're
So you hit on JT. What about Nyheim Hines? They're down pass catchers. And
Can he play in the slot, like on first and second down? Is that something that's possible?
I don't know. I'm just saying, like, maybe they get down there and he's just utilized at 5'2". I think it's like definitely a large field GPP play, but
yeah, that's not something you're doing cash or like a small tournament or single entry, but he could be in your pool for million maker stuff. Is that where you're at, Kirkwood, as far as Hines?
Yeah, sure. Like, you can play a little bit. I'm not excited about him whatsoever.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't currently have him in, but I was just thinking because of that situation with Pittman out.
You know, if you don't want to have to decide about Hines, if you don't want to play Kirkwood in head-to-head or Bobby in head-to-head or myself in head-to-head, you can play at Stat Hero. Stat Hero, it's a unique fantasy sports platform that allows users to compete only against the house, not against other players in a contest. You participate in a head-to-head style contest for Stat Hero. They're going to provide a lineup that you beat. You got to beat it with your own lineup, as well as pick'em style contests. You should also check out the Big Dime League, which is a season-long leaderboard NFL contest with up to $50,000 in prizes. We're going to help hook you up with a nice, sweet, fat deposit bonus as well. Use the promo code GRINDERS, 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 50% deposit bonus, up to $250. Jump into the action today. We also, lots of states are legalize sports gambling these days, or maybe you know a guy. Check out scoresandodds.com, your number one place for all things sports betting. Get ready for the NFL season and arm yourself with the best tools and analysis. Check out the brand new Parlay IQ, which is currently free for everybody. As of right now, you use it to build optimal same-game parlays based on thousands of games worth of simulated data. Was playing with that the other day. I think it simulates 5,000 games in a matter of seconds. And if you like those single-game parlays, it'll help you build it out and help you guide you the best place to play it as far as odds. All right, Bobby, open it up as far as receivers. Do you want to start with the cheap nonsense or the good stuff first? Because, you know, we live in the world of the salary cap, and we got to get these cheapies to make stuff work. And the absence of Pittman for Indianapolis, people are going to be playing some of the, Paris Campbell's a guy that's going to kind of sort of sum up pop for Arizona. What's his name? The Dortch, the 5'7" Dortch is, he's super cheap and he kind of sort of makes stuff work. Do you want to start up top or you want to start down low?
We could start down low because we just pretty much talked about the Indy situation. Yeah, Paris Campbell, 3-7. I just have issues with Matt Ryan on the road. It's going to be what they should see weather, I think, according to Roth a little bit. But it would be Paris Campbell, Ashton Doolin, guys you're thinking about in that situation. Also, Mike Strachan, which I think would be the guy. He's like a preseason darling. I think that he's like 6'5", so maybe if you're looking for a big play, or maybe he replaces the Michael Pittman. Not that he's going to actually replace Pittman's production, but maybe he catches a bomb or something. I'm just not too high on the Indy situation. I actually like Jacksonville defense for that reason. In terms of Dortch, like we talked about Dortch a little bit on the show last week. I'm getting a lot of Dortch, and I feel like I really need to bring that down because you really don't want to play the chalk wide receiver in large field stuff. I feel like he's 5'7". He's not the greatest athlete in terms of like spark score, but he is a football player. That's the other thing is like I think he's a good football player. Like it seemed like they were just looking for him as like Kyler last week. I'm not big on Marquise, but they were going to Dortch, so I don't know. Maybe I was thinking about full fade, but maybe I'll just play the field, I guess. I don't know. It's a tough decision with Dortch. Up top, Devontae Adams, obviously the best play on the slate. At the wide receiver position, I think he'll probably be in everyone's cash game teams. That game's so paced up. Like if I was playing Adams, I'm not playing him with Carr. Just a slight way to differentiate it. And then if I was trying to fade Adams, Jamar Chase, who I think is also leverage off of Kirk's boy Mixon, although I think Mixon's probably a good play. And Debo, who Kirky can kind of get into here in a second, are very good ways to kind of get over on Adams. And then Cooper Kupp, 9,900. The issue with Cooper Kupp is he has to get at least 50, but if no one else hits ceilings and Cooper does, then he could get there, I guess. So I don't know. It's an interesting slate at the wide receiver position. Kirk and Amon-Ra would probably be my guys in like the 5 to 6K range that I would have interest in. I think they're going to get peppered. McLaurin could be pivot off of Curtis Samuel and Dotson. What they could be, they could somewhat be chalky. McLaurin will see lower ownership because of that. Richie James down at 3-2. I know I went up. We started down.
Is he real? Is Richie James real, or is that just the one?
Richie James, Sterling Shepard. Like I would imagine, if you're playing Daniel Jones, you have to consider these guys, right? Or maybe you don't. Take one. Trying to think of it. Jarvis Landry, like I said, really like Landry. Seen a lot of targets last week. For whatever reason, that guy just catches passes in every team he's on. So that's pretty much the wide receiver position for me. Jalen Waddle too. I think I had some interest in. Yeah, that pretty much covers it.
You like Waddle more than Tyreek when you consider everything?
I like both of them, but I currently don't have Tua, so I think Waddle's just easier because of the price tag being lower. That's why Waddle's hitting for me.
A lot of names being thrown out there. Kirkwood, first I want to get your take as far as the cheapies. Do you have official takes to kind of make stuff work? Are you on Yahoo? Are you forced to play the nonsense of like Dortch?
No,
you don't have
not
to.
At all. Not at all. Nope. So I don't really care about Dortch, the Dortch chamber. I was looking at receiving props yesterday, and there were some books that had him like they had him ahead of Marquise, but they had him like top 6 for overall receiving yard props. And I was like, are you kidding me here? But, I'm going back to Marquise, to Hollywood Brown, but I get it if people don't want to. Speaking of the Giants situation for going down cheap there, and you're asking if Richie James is real, I don't think it's. I mean, I think he's fine. I said it last week. I made I kind of planted my flag with Sterling Shepard. It looked awful until it wasn't when he hit that 65-yard touchdown, and so I could point to the scoreboard. Now the usage wasn't very good. He only had 4 targets, but I still believe that he's going to lead the Giants in targets out of receivers And so he's the guy that I'll just keep going back to if I want to play the passing game there. But and let me touch on Debo again. So I've already made that 33% target share, and then also the 8 carries and 52 rushing yards, and he gets high value touches in the red zone. Then you look at the matchup. Javonte just smashed them in the passing game. And from a running back perspective, also their secondary should be extremely bad. So it's like either way, he should be able to crush them. Also, Kittle out in games without Kittle, he averages an extra 3 targets plus 40 receiving yards. So it's like everything. Like I said, that's my guy. So I'm going Debo heavy this week. Yeah.
Who's got an official Mike Evans take? I know people with their cornerback wide receiver matchups, and they're sort of shaky at best sometimes. But if that is real, that seems to be one of the more real ones. Lattimore tends to shut them down. But we also know that Evans excels in the absence of Godwin. I don't know what to do with this one, and I also think I like some of the New Orleans pieces. I think he's an interesting run back. Anybody got a Mike Evans take one way or the other, or just you're sort of like me and you're throwing your hands in the air?
They kind of. I think you can go. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, Lattimore has like a great history shutting him down, except for one game. He always gets up for Mike Evans. It should be, in theory, pretty easy to not let Mike Evans beat you in this game, especially with Lattimore. I get it from a usage standpoint, like who else are they going to go to? I also, my take is I think this game just busts, right? I play Taysom, but I feel like there's just both of these offenses are going to be completely out of sync in this game. They also are 2 good defenses, both sides. So I feel like that, everyone's going to be playing a lot. There's going to be a lot of Mike Evans playing. There's going to be a lot of Lenny Fournette. And I'm thinking I'm going to fade them both.
Fair enough. By the way, if you're in the chat, kindly hit that like button, do subscribe, hit those notifications. I did not mean to neglect your questions. Ask them for Crunch Time. Crunch Time crew coming out in about an hour plus. Beimfohr, SquirrelPatrol coming on in about 10 minutes or so. We're going to yield to them shortly. I believe a Beer Makers fan video is going to play in between us. At least that's what played for us last week. I am going to drop this in chat, by the way. I tweeted this out earlier. You see all the fabulous tools, our RotoGrinders tools being shown off here on the screen, and you want access to them. You want access to them for a month, and you don't want to pay for them. Just respond to my tweet. I'm going to drop it in chat. Respond to that tweet and give me the boldest and most accurate prediction for week 2. Be bold, be accurate, and somebody's going to win themselves 1 month free of RotoGrinders Premium. Do answer that now. Bobby, you know what? I want to knock this out first because, Bobby, I know you like I learned this on your podcast. You like talking defenses.
Yeah.
So I want your official take as far as the Bengals defense on DK. It's 2-2. They're going to be in everybody's cash lineup. It's going to be an outrageous number for tournaments. There's not a lot of pivots that are spectacular, but there's high variance. It's defense. Goofy stuff happens all the time. My off-the-board one for the record is the Raiders. How are you handling the Bengals at 2-2, specifically on DK?
Yeah, right now I could see myself either fading or being under the field. I usually fade the chalk defense, so it's a little bit difficult this week because they are underpriced at $2,200. The news came in after Dak got hurt, so they're definitely mispriced, and that's why they're as chalky as they are. Kirky just hit on the Saints in this game kind of blowing up. I like the Saints D at 2,400, like right above them, especially if Fournette and Evans are going to gain steam. I think it's a good tournament leverage play. I'll definitely have some Saints defense. I like the Saints. That scenario where the pace is what it is and people are going to be targeting that game, I just don't think Brady has the weapons that he needs to really be successful in that situation. Even if he's passing at a high clip, Brady's always been successful over the middle, slot guys, pass catching to throwing the ball to his running back. Leonard's all right in terms of like running routes and pass catching, but he's like no James White in a situation where this front seven for the Saints is very fast and they're going to be getting at Brady and the O-line isn't what it is. So I don't know, like the Saints D, I think they've done a good job with Mike Evans. So the Saints are going to be the team that I'm gravitating towards as a pivot off the Bengals.
Kirkwood, feel free to give your thoughts as far as defense. We are behind on time. We're going to have to yield very shortly. I want to knock out some thoughts, at least your thoughts. Give me a minute or so on tight ends.
Tight ends. So this is kind of a rough spot, but I think it's a great spot to just try to get to Mark Andrews whenever you can. There's so much separation between Mark Andrews and the rest of the field here and everyone's going to try to go down low, right? They're going to talk themselves into going super low with Juwan Johnson. They're going to play Albert O, who's at best the fourth option on the Denver Broncos. They're going to play Higbee, who again is at best like third or fourth option there in that game when you have Kupp who steals everything. Darren Waller has to compete with Devontae. So Mark Andrews doesn't have to compete with anybody. He is the guy. He ran a route on 94% of the dropbacks last week. I mean, that's just insane. He was first in air yards for the week, which, air yards, I wish I could cash them in. But never seems to work. But and he had a kind of down game and didn't do much. And the offense was kind of anemic in general in that game against the Jets, even though they scored 24 points. But so Andrews is the clear separation. So I'm trying to get to him in GPPs as often as I can.
And we both talked about Taysom. Taysom is being interesting as well, where you can play him at tight end on Yahoo and on FanDuel. Andre in chat, he'll be on later, telling us that Julio Jones not expected to play. So, I mean, that kind of spells even like more doom for that potential Tampa Bay offense if Evans is going to get locked down by Lattimore and that line. That offensive line is all sorts of beat up too. Tom Brady, I'm told, is 45, like at some point, right? Father time. And New Orleans, tough place to play. That's a tough home crowd. I kind of like the defense on that side as well too. Quickly, if you don't mind, Bobby, what do you have to add as far as tight ends?
I think Kirky hit the nail on the head with Andrews. Lamar is going to – I feel like with the rate that the Miami Dolphins blitz, he's going to have to move a little bit more. He's going to have to make quicker decisions, and I think that just more than not benefits Andrews. Maybe Lamar runs one in or maybe throws 2 touchdowns to Andrews. But, yeah, I really like Andrews. I know that can kind of negatively correlate to near the goal line, but I still think I like the Lamar to Andrews stack a bunch, and I think it's a way to differentiate whenever it's paying down.
Is that your favorite stack on the slate? Who is your favorite stack on the slate?
Yeah, I'm still having issues with quarterback. That I like Burrow to Chase. That's the one I'm gonna plant my flag on.
See it and raise it, Kirkwood. We gotta get out of here. Give the people your favorite stack before we go.
It feels so dirty to say I'm gonna go back to Carson Wentz again after he just smashed last week, but I'm going to go back to Carson Wentz again. And this time I think it's going to be the, JSU. And I talked about JSU, who actually buried me last week with Aaron Jones call, but Scary Terry here, people forgot about him after, Curtis Samuel's week last week, Gibson's week last week. They're going in the dome here in Detroit. I think this game shoots out. I think Terry is the most logical piece to stack with Wentz for massive upside and is going to go a little bit overlooked just based on what happened last week. So and then I'll run it back with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, it's a pretty easy stack for me.
Love Amon-Ra as well. This stream does not stop, takes you all the way up to lock. Crunch time comes on around 12:30. In between them, I think we're going to get a little video of Beer Makers Fan. 11:30, about 5 minutes or so, you're going to get 70-time live finalists, SquirrelPatrol, Beimfohr as well. Myself, Kirkwood, and Bobby, we appreciate y'all watching. Check out Beer Makers Fan. I believe that's the video. It's going to be queued up. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on those notifications, kick back because SquirrelPatrol and Erik will be with you in just 5 minutes or so. On behalf of Bobby, Kirkwood, myself, thanks for watching. We're stepping aside. Cue beer.
What's going on, Grinders? It's Chief. We're back talking Monday Night Fight for Sunday football, the main slate. Get in the prop shop. Tons of great things are happening. Listen, we're talking Baltimore. We're talking Miami. Is it more? Is it less? Let's find out. So we've got Tyreek Hill here at 71.5 yards, and I think Tyreek is going to easily blow through this number yet again. Had 12 targets week 1. I'm not saying he's going to pick up 12, but I definitely think if that's the volume we saw, I think 8 to 10 targets is definitely going to be in his wheelhouse. Saw 41.38% of the market share. So I think that continues again this week. They'll get him the ball any way they can and allow him to rack up yards. And we also know he's one big play away from blowing any total open. So really like him here. On the other side, we've got Mark Andrews at 61.5 receiving yards. I'm also going to think more on this one. Last week we saw him get a 25% market share. That was good for 7 targets. I'm expecting this game to be very competitive. I think he gets at least 7 to 10 targets again this week. I think the target share is also going to be there. And we also know that he's able to pick up chunk plays. 125-yard play here, a 10-yard catch there, an 8-yard catch there. It all adds up. And I think Mark Andrews is going to get it that way this week. So love him over 61.5. Love Tyreek over 71.5. I think this game is going to be very competitive. All right, we've been here talking Monday Night Fight. I'll see you back here on Monday, folks, for Monday Night Football.
What is going on, guys? Happy week 2, GPP Final Takes show here on RotoGrinders.com. I am your host, Erik Beimfohr. You can find me on Twitter at Erik Beimfohr, and joined by a longtime friend. Very excited to be doing it. No offense to Tuttle, who is with me week 1. No offense, but I'm very excited to have John Breslin, aka SquirrelPatrol. You guys all know, of course, shipping tournaments left and right. And excited to break down this slate with you, John, because it's a very unique one, I feel like, where we don't have so many of the superstar high-powered offenses, and then we have, it's only week 2 and we have all these injuries. We'll probably get maybe even a bombshell here or there as we are going live, but how are you just in general feeling about this week 2 slate?
Good, yeah. It's an interesting slate. We haven't done a football show together in a while. I think we've actually hung out in person more recently than we've done a football show. We used to do Q hunting. Yep. Yeah, it's a great slate. Because especially on DraftKings, I think the chalk is really obvious. And I'm fascinated to see like what the ownership percentages look like. Like week 2, are you having a lot of people that are just like looking up optimal lineup and great plays or whatever? And just like jamming in that chalk, and how many people are differentiating across like different price points for different contests. But yeah, it's an interesting slate, and we got some kind of last minute injury news, or at least pretty like injury news yesterday that's really going to affect some things. So can't wait to get started.
Yeah. So as the injury reports roll in, let's really quickly level set, because there has been a lot of new. I left. So I live in St. Louis, for anybody that doesn't see all the St. Louis crap behind me. And I'm like, I'm going to take Saturday off. Pujols is chasing 700 home runs. I'm going to go to the baseball game. Can't be that much stuff that happens, right? We feel like we always know. And then Michael Pittman out. Alvin Kamara's hurt. I thought George Kittle might bounce back. Looks like he's bad, right? There's a lot going on. This morning, we also got Julio Jones out. We got DeAndre Swift is going to play, but is looking maybe limited. It was kind of an awkward quote. I'm sure I'm also missing someone. For the Colts, we already had Alec Pierce out. So now basically every passing game, every option besides Jonathan Taylor for the Colts is extremely cheap. And so was there any of that stuck out to you as maybe the Colts stuff? I guess we should talk about when every receiver on an offense is $3,000 on DraftKings. Maybe that's probably where we start, because if you are playing a Colts wide receiver, your entire roster construction changes, right? As opposed to even if you go up to the mid 4Ks or 5K range on DraftKings for that wide receiver 3 spot versus the Stone Min 3000, it changes everything. Right now, you can get Devontae Adams. Now you can get a good tight end if you want one. Now you can get Saquon, whoever. How are you feeling about those Colts wide receivers in tournaments?
I mean, I like them. Actually, there's a guy, the tight end. They have like a rookie tight end that I think is in play.
Kylan Granson, yeah, 2,600.
Because I think tight end's a little bit of a wasteland this week because there's no Travis Kelce and there's no George Kittle. So that was another like a little injury thing yesterday. I guess maybe even this morning. And I think it's really difficult to differentiate. I kind of like Paris Campbell because I think he's a former first round pick. He's just always been hurt, but now he's healthy and everybody else is hurt. So he's getting his opportunity. And he's looked good when he's on the field. I think Doolin caught a touchdown yesterday. You've got the 5th round rookie tight end. Like if you have the opportunity to play a 5th round rookie tight end in week 2, you got to jump at it. But I joke, but it actually, if I'm gonna miss, right, like if I'm gonna take like big chances, take big chances really cheap at a position that I'm not that worried someone else is gonna like run away from the field.
Exactly. So it is interesting. I have it sorted by projected ownership for the Colts, and it is funny. Rob is in the chat, who works with me at Spike Week, and I was excited that you brought up Kylan Granson because I've been a little bit on the Kylan Granson. I've been backing him throughout the summer and fantasy drafts, best ball, and such. And I do think, not to lead off the entire show with Kylan Granson, but how you handle the Colts, and you could just say, you know what, maybe the Colts stink without Michael Pittman and without Alec Pierce. And that's a totally reasonable, going on the road to Jacksonville. Maybe they just nobody puts up anything super fantasy relevant. That's also a stance I think you can take. But if you are going to dip your toes into these guys, which I imagine most people will, how you handle them is extremely important for tournaments. And I couldn't agree more, whether it's a tight end that I like or a tight end that I don't, when like you said, it's all uncertain. The Colts probably don't even know exactly how, who's going to get touches, how this is going to play out. And so if I'm going to miss, and also if I'm going to hit on the $2,600 tight end who is projecting for 4% ownership on DraftKings, I mean, that hit is astronomical on a weak tight end slate, on a slate where we do want to get some of these superstars in. And then on the flip side, if Kylan Granson has 2 catches for 20 yards, you're not dead. But if Ashton Doolin has 2 catches for 20 yards, you're pretty much dead, because the wide receivers are just going to put up so many, and running backs are going to put up so many raw points. So I think for me, I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm actually I'm trying out playing a few more lineups. You know me, I was like 1 to 3 lineups at all times. I'm trying out playing a few more lineups, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing with the Colts. As of right now, I actually think Granson is going. I'm gonna join you there, be my highest exposure Colt, and then I'm kind of mixing through these other wide receivers. The one guy I did want to bring up that's in a similar vein to Granson is, I don't even know how to Mike Strachan. I don't know how to say this guy's last name, but he's the one who absolutely nobody's gonna play out of all of them. And we're in this situation where it's completely uncertain. I like Ashton Doolin in a vacuum the best, and Paris Campbell's right there with him. But who is to say that Strachan isn't the guy who picks up 8 targets and maybe catches a long touchdown? He's produced in the preseason before he earned a spot on this roster. He's also probably the more likely guy with Doolin to play on the outside where Pittman was playing. Campbell's probably still in the slot where he has kind of always been, generally speaking, at least in 3 wide sets. So he's almost kind of the most fascinating guy for me for tournaments. And I want to kind of have exposure to all of Campbell, Doolin, and Strachan, and then obviously Granson. Any counters to that from you?
Yeah, I think we should just also throw out the caveat that it's possible Jonathan Taylor just gets like 200 yards.
True.
So like the answer might be obvious and just not convenient for like DraftKings purposes, where where it's none of the really cheap guys that end up excelling. And so I think that gives you a little bit of a different lineup construction as well. But yeah, there's a possibility it's Jonathan Taylor. Like Strachan, I've seen like a little bit of hype on Twitter about him. I don't know a whole lot about him, and we're kind of down to these to these wide receivers. I mean, it's only week 2, and we're already down to these wide receivers. I haven't really heard of the guy before today, but he could get some opportunity. I mean, he's an NFL player. He got drafted
week 2. Week 2.
Yeah, so it's possible it's just Jonathan Taylor. And like this isn't an offense that we're expecting to go out there and score 35 points necessarily. It could happen, but if that does happen, it's probably going to be a couple of Jonathan Taylor touchdowns. So we should keep that in mind as we dive into the weeds of these wide receivers. But then again, we don't know. And Greg Dortch came out last week and had a pretty good game. It was a difference in a lot of lineups. So yeah, maybe it is one of these Colts guys. One of these Colts wide receivers, and yeah, that's why we play the game.
I know. Pivoting to another. So we did just get word that Julio is out. Chris Godwin is out for the Bucks. And also Alvin Kamara is out in that game. So I was hoping we would make it at least a few weeks before we had to spend the entire show talking about who's in and who's out. But here we are, nonetheless. That game is also interesting. And I think from a projections and opportunity perspective, you're going to see something kind of not the same with the Colts, right? Because the pricing is not quite the same. But there's just two offenses that have generally been good for fantasy, generally speaking. When Alvin Kamara has been out, Mark Ingram has been awesome for fantasy, even though it's old, dusty Mark Ingram. It was Latavius Murray before him and Mark Ingram before Latavius Murray. And with the Bucks, even though they look a little shaky on offense, I think, particularly with the offensive line, I have some very, very serious concerns about how effective they'll be. It's still a Tom Brady offense, and somebody's going to catch some passes. And they really just have Mike Evans, Russell Gage. I'm not even sure who's going to be the third wide receiver, if it's Perriman or Scotty Miller or Darden. But between those two teams, with those being kind of the next most notable to me injuries from a fantasy perspective, what are your thoughts on the Gage, Evans, or maybe Fournette? And are you doing anything with the Kamara news?
I'm interested in Fournette. I think he's probably the beneficiary. And I don't love Mike Evans in the spot. I'm not thrilled with the other Bucks periphery wide receivers. I think you're gonna probably strike out more often than you hit trying to play that. I don't necessarily see any of them going berserk either. I don't see any of them being the guy that you had to have, even though it's somebody will have a good game. I don't see any of them being the guy that you had to have. I do like Mark Ingram a little bit with Kamara out, just because he's really cheap. It's maybe more of a FanDuel play than a DraftKings play, because he's probably not going to catch a ton of passes. But I think he's near minimum priced, or like 5,300, I think, on FanDuel. So I think that's a play that you can play on FanDuel, where you're only getting the half point per reception. Touchdowns count a little bit more. I mean, obviously, the Taysom Hill thing was a concern, but he's only 5,300. So if you miss, you're missing cheap.
Speaking of Taysom, we should hit Taysom super quickly for FanDuel. Does this elevate him to you as a better play on FanDuel now?
I don't know, because I think there's probably only about a 1 in 3 chance. He's got a touchdown prop out there, right? And I looked, and I think it's equates to about a 25% chance or 30% chance. And that's decent, but it's probably not enough that I want to go there. Yeah,
and he is 6,200, which is not ridiculously but when you think about it, he played 26% of the snaps last week. Now without Kamara, we can say, okay, they want to get him on the field a little bit more, but it's not like he's going to play running back. It's not like Kamara's out and they're going to put him back in the back. Maybe they'll run a couple more Wildcat snaps, but you're still talking about a guy who's going to play 25 snaps at most, maybe something like that. And so, I just had to hit him because I know somebody's going to bring him up. He's tight end and Alvin Kamara's out. Somebody's going to ask about him. I think if he were cheaper, Juwan Johnson is the starting tight end who's going to play almost every snap for the Saints, and he's 4,500, and Taysom Hill is 6,200, all because he kind of has this gadgety role where we can pipe dream about touchdowns. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, I think for tournaments, you got to be thinking about who do you have to have? Taysom Hill, if he could go, he's definitely going to go in there for these gadget plays. It's probably going to be red zone, and like if he gets a touchdown, you're gonna like be like thrilled and I got that sneaky touchdown. But I don't think it's that sneaky. It's not that cheap. And he like, what are the chances that happens a few times? Like you need that to happen a couple of times,
at least twice. Yeah.
To be the guy you need to have. Like, and even if he's throwing a touchdown, right? Like, some kind of wildcat thing. I mean, that's 4 points. Like that's a 20-yard reception, or or like a 30-yard reception, right?
Right.
It's not the thing you had to have. So I think it's like the narrative appeal is almost better than the actual numeric scoring.
100%. I'm gonna hit a couple of these comments. Shannon asked if Evans is a lock because Tampa doesn't have anyone else. I certainly think from a volume perspective, Mike Evans is going to get all the opportunity he can handle today. This is a very brutal matchup. Not to really get our hands in the dirt with the wide receiver cornerback stuff, but Marshawn Lattimore is extremely good. The Saints have a good defense and have historically really, really had the Bucs number. And this is one of those things where I was going to get to this, but it with a kind of a summary of some of these games. This isn't. I think people treat NFL too much like NBA DFS sometimes, right? LeBron is out. You got to play whoever. Giannis is out. It's like, okay, we know we Giannis has sat so many times, you just know, okay, Middleton, Drew, Portis, whatever, you click the same buttons because it's all opportunity. And at worst, they're going to play close enough minutes, right? And it's an accumulation based on rates. In football, when you remove Chris Godwin, you have an injured offensive line, you remove Julio Jones, Gronk is not there anymore. It can just be a disaster on the offense. Evans could still get 10 targets. We saw this last week with the Rams. Cooper Kupp got there. Tyler Higbee had 11 targets, so I'm sure we'll talk about Tyler Higbee later. Tyler Higbee had 11 targets, but the offense stunk. It didn't do anything. You need efficiency and volume, and more than anything, you need efficiency. Like, you can get all the volume you want if you're not efficient. Look at Deontay Johnson. Why does Deontay Johnson never win anyone a tournament in DFS? He gets tons of volume. He's just not very efficient on it. He doesn't score a lot of touchdowns, right? Jacoby Myers doesn't score touchdowns. The volume can only get you so far. And with the Evans thing, it was like, I just, to your point was so perfect in how you put it. The chance that anyone is the guy you have to have is very unlikely. So when you start to get elevated ownership strictly because like teammates out and we start assigning opportunity to players, I tend to be like, look, there's other good plays on this slate that are going to be less owned and aren't the shiny new toy that we got just because somebody is injured. When if we take all the best players off in offense, the offense might just suck as opposed to like somebody else is going to get a lot more fantasy points.
Yeah, like the Lakers, when LeBron is out, don't have the option of just dribbling the ball slower, right? And slowing down the game. Like they got it as a shot, like they got it every 24 seconds, right? And yeah, and actually I think it's a mistake people make in NBA DFS a little bit, right? Where sometimes like, 3 starters are out, we got to jam in all of the guys that are starting. Like, no, sometimes the team just loses like 110 to 65.
Yeah,
like, you didn't want anybody. Like, you should have just skipped over the game. That's why I kind of think Fournette's the beneficiary, because I think he's done well, and I think the Bucs can just keep handing off, and like I think Brady will direct the offense. But I think the first thing I always look at it on any slate is just implied point total. Like, what are the point totals? And like, I'm not this isn't like wizardry or anything like that. This is, people know this. Like, I'm looking at the teams that are like implied to score the most points. And then we get these like Sunday morning like injury situations, like, well, I gotta jam in the new starter. Like, well, no, like keep focused on those implied point totals, that pace of play. Like, what are the Vegas lines telling you are going to be the highest scoring games? And I'd rather differentiate a little bit off of the chalk there, because I said it on a show this week. I think people have a lot of confidence this week in the teams, not just the teams they think are going to score the highest points, but like how those points are going to be scored. And I'm interested in like differentiating there, like, because I think you're going to see a lot of like Raiders. You're going to see, you'll see a lot of like Bengals defense, but I think like Carr, Devontae Adams are going to be really popular. And I think you can maybe pivot there. Not that like Adams is a bad play, but he's like, he might draw serious ownership. Like I was running like optimal lineups yesterday, and I had to run like so many optimal lineups before I got Devontae Adams out of the optimal lineup.
Yep. I think it was Cardi has Davante Adams projected as like a median of like 9 catches or something like that.
Yeah.
So like that tells you about, like you said, how not only how strong of a play he is, just in a vacuum, but when those are like the types of projections that are driving these things, and it is going to be, like you said, very difficult. And then when you start to get value opening up that allows everyone to get to Davante Adams, that elevates his ownership, that elevates, the Ashton Doolins and whatever I'm trying to think of, Juwan Johnson, whatever. It elevates those guys' ownership because now I just want the best play, right? I want Davante Adams. Your note about kind of the point totals and such is another great one where we do lose perspective on Sunday morning sometimes of that. You want to adapt to the latest information. You don't necessarily want to be like, okay, again, using the Bucs example, Godwin and Julio are out. I have to play one of these Bucs because of like what you said, that total is 43 and a half, something like that. Like that's kind of on one of the lower ends of the spectrum. Colts Jags is the same, 43 and a half. I'm looking at scoresandodds.com right now. 43 and a half for both of those games. The Raiders, as you said, maybe we have to think about ways if we want to play the Raiders game, but the Raiders total, has cruised past 50 all week. Falcons Rams 46, right? For a reference point, the Giants and Panthers, who no one's hurt, I guess Wan'Dale Robinson is hurt or whatever. No one is hurt in that game. Same total. And outside of Saquon Barkley, I'm not sure there's going to be like a ton of ownership in that game, but it's because it's not the shiny new toy where we can like assign volume to some of these guys. Let's talk about the Raiders game a little bit. How do you handle, particularly now where you can play these guys if you want to, right? Anybody can make a lineup where they can fit Davante Adams in there. If you want to play Hollywood or you want to play Connor, you want to play Dortch again as your cheap guy. Access to this game is not difficult. How do you handle that when everybody sees that this is the best play? I can fit it however I want, and there's no Chiefs, there's no Bills, right? There's no Chargers, there's no etc. How do you kind of handle that? Because you do lose quite a bit of projection the further you go down that optimal list, right? To try to find that what's the best Davante Adams team or non-Davante Adams team, it's losing a lot of points probably to the Davante Adams team and Carr team, et cetera. So how do you approach that?
So I don't think you need to get away from Davante Adams. Like if you're playing 150 lineups. So again, it really depends whether you're talking about cash or tournaments. Like cash, there's no reason to try to differentiate from anything. Like just play what the optimal is telling you, and it's going to tell you Davante Adams, like by far. He should be like 80, 90% owned in cash. For tournaments, like, yeah, like what if Josh Jacobs, right? Like what if Josh Jacobs is the guy? And so I think you can put Adams and Jacobs in there, and then if you're playing 150 lineups, I think, yeah, you should have some game stacks of that game that just don't have Davante Adams. Like what if what if he catches, 5 passes, 70 yards. It's a good score, but it's not had to have it score. And then there's other guys like Cooper Kupp is in that price range, and then Kupp has an outstanding game, and so you have like Dortch or Renfro or Waller that are getting the touchdowns from the Raiders side, and then you can stick like Cooper Kupp in that lineup, and like that's something that could happen. That's totally reasonable. Like Davante Adams has a okay game. Other guys on the Raiders get the touchdowns. It is a high-scoring game, but then there's other guys in that price range that are outscoring Adams that you need to have. So that's a way I approach my lineups, whether it's a single entry or 150 max. And then obviously, like when you're doing 150 lineups, you can set like exposure caps where you're obviously just not going to be able to have those Davante Adams lineups. So it's not like if you're playing single entry, I think it's totally fine to play Davante Adams. But I also think it's fine not to. And he's probably going to be like 40, 50% owned. And so, he could be the guy. I mean, but this is a guy that could be the guy you need to have. It just depends on your risk tolerance and how you think the game will play out.
Definitely. I think he is one of the more difficult players to leverage against because Waller is the one who sticks out to me. And if they had any form of a backfield that I felt a little more comfortable with, I'm trying to force myself to play some Josh Jacobs because he is a natural leverage point and a natural point where that leverage comes from the game going differently than we expected, right? If this is 31, if this was like last week, if the Raiders do to the Cardinals what the Chiefs did to the Cardinals, yes, of course, Devontae can crush in any of those games, but maybe Devontae, I talked to Matt Kelly, the Podfather, about this in our show this week. It's like, crazy stuff happens, dude. You can, like, Devontae Adams could draw 2 PIs in the end zone, right? And then guess what? Everybody is tilting their face off on Twitter because Josh Jacobs gets 2 1-yard goal line touchdowns and Devontae drew the pass interference in the end zone. He could catch, you mentioned like 5 or 6 balls. He could catch 8 or 9 and not be the guy you need to have. Like, how difficult it is for an $8,600 player to be the guy you have to have in tournaments is very, very difficult. And so maybe if you like some of this other, chalk or other popular plays, you want to play Saquon. Maybe you want to play what we're looking at, Javonte or whatever. Maybe Lenny, maybe Fournette gets a boost in ownership or something like that. You want to play, what do we have here? Tyreek, right? You want to play Alberto in a lineup. Like, that's when I start to be like, okay, maybe I'll do, maybe I'm not playing Alberto. Maybe I'm playing Waller. Maybe I'm playing Jacobs. And just thinking through, like you said, how I want to handle that across all my lineups, or even if I'm doing one. I actually think you mentioned the misnomer of NBA DFS. I think there's a huge misnomer on single entry and 3-entry max play, where if everyone thinks I'll just play, close to the optimal and then make some little pivots, right? Maybe I'll stack a game instead of doing something. It's like if everyone is doing that same thing in single entry, all it does is make Devontae Adams more higher owned and make everybody on the same type of lineup in the single entry and 3-entry max tournaments. So in that case, in the Millie Maker, Devontae isn't even going to be as high owned as he is in your $100, the SPY, your $100 single entry tournament. So in the SPY is where I can gain the most by fading him in that one lineup. It feels more uncomfortable than it does in the Millie. In the Millie, you can convince yourself, I got to beat 500,000 people or whatever, I'm going to go crazy. But in the single entry is where you actually gain the most if you're right about that player not being the guy that you need. So I thought he was an interesting point for that kind of single entry versus MME discussion.
Yeah, actually, I think you're really hitting on something there. And I'm doing a show this year with JM The Win, and we actually talk about this. And I think single entry thinking is actually very flawed across these contests, where you're right. People think, well, I've got one lineup. It's basically like a cash game. So I'm going to play my cash game lineup. And a lot of times it's just a cash game lineup. Sometimes it's my cash game lineup, one little differentiation because I don't really need to get that different. No, the payout structure dictates you need to get very different. You should be playing a tournament lineup in those single entry. And not only should you be playing a tournament lineup in those single entry, the payoff is much bigger because so much of the field is playing a cash game lineup. If you differentiate off of Devontae Adams, or I'm just using that as the example of the chalk, because he's the chalk this week. If you the payoff is much higher, where suddenly that guy, instead of being 20-30% owned in those, 100,000s of people Millie makers, he's 70% owned. And so if he's a guy that you can't have in the winning lineup, suddenly just that one differentiation, puts you in the payout for the tournament.
Definitely.
Just about that Raiders game, something I was talking about earlier this week, and I think it's not something I've figured out, but there's this idea because I think Carr is going to be pretty highly owned as well, both FanDuel and DraftKings. And is there a way where you can play another quarterback, but also play some of the Raiders receiving pieces, right? Is there a really cheap, especially on DraftKings where the quarterback pricing goes much lower? Is there a super cheap guy that you can put in that could maybe get some rushing touchdowns, and then you're also playing Devontae Adams, and you're what if Adams is all of the Raiders offense, right? Actually flip it the other way, instead of having a bad or mediocre game, what if he's the entire offense, but you don't need David Carr then, right? So you can play Adams and you're playing another quarterback, and that's differentiating your lineup. You're playing a Lamar Jackson. I mean, obviously that's a lot of salary, but now we've got a lot of cheaper pieces. Like, what if Lamar Jackson gets 80 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns and some passing work as well, right? That's a possible differentiator. Like, I see like Marcus Mariota. I mean, that's a game we don't expect to be close, but it's going to be high scoring. And we kind of picture that game in our heads as like a 35-10 Rams win, but that's actually not, that's not what the Vegas line says. Yeah, I mean, we expect the Rams to win, but like Mariota's really cheap. Like, doesn't need that much. You pair him then, and like maybe you can fit. I haven't mapped it out yet, but maybe you can put in like a Mariota, Kupp, Devontae Adams lineup with all the value you have, and then suddenly like you're getting a lot of differentiation from the field, and it's still something that's very plausible that could happen.
Definitely. I'm very high on Mariota this week. I'm glad you mentioned that strategy. It's not only that strategy, but it's a nice and easy way to, like you said, why can't a running quarterback? Marcus Mariota ran for 75 yards last week. He scored 20 fantasy points. He didn't even throw for a touch. He didn't even have a passing touchdown. That's the kind of upside that someone that runs like him can bring. I tagged Trey Lance as well. A little bit more concerned about general ownership for Trey Lance. And then if the weather's going to be really bad, this poor kid, the weather's going to be really bad. Again, I think it looks like out there. So that has me a little bit concerned. But again, they're only $100 apart. They both play in the afternoon. So you have some options there with those guys. But I love that. I just can't. Maybe I'm Galaxy bringing this. I clearly understand like Derek Carr is going to probably have a good game here, but I can't wrap my head around playing him as the highest owned quarterback on a slate, like regardless of matchup and regardless of situation. There's just so many paths to him having a good game. And again, to keep quoting you, not be the guy that you have to have in tournaments when there are all these other quarterbacks who in particular run or are also in good matchups or are just better fantasy options, right? Lamar is probably not in as good of a matchup, but he's Lamar Jackson. If he ran for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns and threw for 3 more, no one would be surprised. He's won an MVP before. Matthew Stafford is the same thing as Derek Carr, projecting 5% own less. I'm not saying that's right, wrong, or anything, but one is the Super Bowl winning quarterback of the St. Louis Rams against the Falcons, and the other is Derek Carr, right? Russell Wilson's playing the Texans. Before last week, we were very excited about Russell Wilson with the new weapons on the Broncos, being unleashed, let Russ cook, all that. And maybe the let's ride thing has is like naturally bumping down his ownership, but he's much cheaper. Joe Burrow, I think you might have Joe Burrow tagged. So Bobby has Joe Burrow tagged, but you had something about the Bengals Cowboys game in expert survey or something that I'm just not remembering exactly what it was. Joe Burrow against a terrible Cowboys defense. No one's playing him. Right. And so there's just go on and on and on. And so I think quarterback is just the one spot for me this week. I'm not really interested in Derek Carr, and you can still play Devontae Adams, right? Play 1% on Marcus Mariota and play Devontae Adams. You're fine. It's totally fine if you want to do that.
Yeah. My Cowboys Bengals thing that I tagged, or I didn't tag him, but Ezekiel Elliott's, like, it was your 5% or less owned play that you think could be a differentiator. All right, Eric Johnson's playing Zeke. Yeah, it's a thing. It doesn't make you feel comfortable, right? But like usually these tournament lineups, like these tournament winning lineups, when you look at them afterwards, you're like, oh, I could see it, But beforehand, it's like, ooh, I don't like that, right? That makes me feel uncomfortable, right? Like in Ezekiel, nobody likes to play Ezekiel Elliott. Like so many people are going to be playing the Bengals defense. Dak Prescott is out. Like over the last year or so, we've now changed our thinking about Ezekiel Elliott, where he's just no longer the guy anymore. Well, they're paying him a lot of money, and now they're quarterbacks out. Like maybe they are telling him, you got to earn this money now. Like we're gonna go run you. You got to run the ball, and it gets a big differentiator like off the Bengals defense. Like pick another defense and then plays Ezekiel Elliott, and so many people have that. Like if they're doing 150 lineups or they're using an optimizer, they've got that setting that's no players against your own defense, and like so nobody's gonna have Ezekiel Elliott because he's like so many people are gonna be playing the Bengals defense that he's just not gonna show up in lineups.
I totally agree, and I what I really like about that is kind of piggybacking on some of the stuff we talked about earlier. With there is a defense who I really like, who is $200 more expensive than your mega chalk Cincinnati defense, and it's the Saints against Tom Brady, which feels disgusting, right? But Tom Brady is missing his entire offensive line. The whole offensive line is out. Now Godwin and Julio are out. Again, Gronk is not there. Kyle Rudolph is inactive, interestingly enough, which I guess might possibly put... I still think they're going to play Cade Otton and Cam Brate, but just wanted to throw that out there because that was an injury I didn't mention earlier. But like, we're talking about a team that Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans are going to go at it on the outside. And so it's Leonard Fournette and Russell Gage that are going to like dominate behind a terrible offensive line against a quality defense. I know someone was in chat saying, the Saints defense isn't quite as talented. And I agree this year, and wasn't great against the Falcons in week 1. And obviously I agree because that's factual, but like it's 1 week and the Bucs also weren't good in week 1. So like we can, that argument absolutely goes both ways. The Cowboys defense is not very impressive and the Bucs didn't really do anything. They ran the ball pretty well, but they didn't. It's not like they were lighting it up through the air, and now they don't have half of their passing game. And so they've shut down. Remember last year, Brady just got absolutely dominated. I think like 3 dudes got hurt for the Bucs in the week 15, week 16, something like that. Saints Bucs. I think it might have been Sunday Night Football. And the Saints just boat raced them because the Bucs couldn't do anything. And so I'm not predicting that to the person in chat, like kind of questioning that. I'm not, that's not my prediction of what happens in the game, but I'm willing to spend $200 more to play the 1% defense versus the 40% defense to find out. And like, if the Bengals defense doesn't score a touchdown, so what? You lost a couple of points. You can make that up elsewhere.
Yeah, it's tough because I've been playing Brady might not have it anymore game for like 8 years. So like before, even pre-DFS, like I don't know, Brady's getting old. But it's gonna happen someday. And it is like I think people overlook offensive line injuries and defensive injuries and don't think about that. Which is why it's good to like have a good like projection system, like like the blitz. Or our RotoGrinders projections, things that think about offensive line injuries, like defensive injuries, and it does get factored somewhat into the Vegas total as well. That's why each like half point there matters. Whether it's the spread or the total. But yeah, I think the offensive line injuries are piling up, and it's an uncomfortable play, like playing the Saints defense. I don't want to play against Tom Brady. But it's a possibility, and defensive scoring can be so random. Like we think about it in our heads as why the team, while the defense is dominating, sometimes it's like a kickoff return touchdown. The
Steelers last week, they lost to the Bengals, right? I think that they ended up losing in overtime. Whatever, game goes to overtime. It wasn't a low scoring game. They gave up mid-20s or something like that, upper 20s in points. But it's just, you get pressure, Burrow threw for a bunch of yards. He just threw 4 interceptions and threw a pick 6, and that's all you need. And to your point, play Zeke. I don't know that I'm going to play Zeke. I have a brand to uphold. I'm an anti-Zeke guy. I can't go, because even if I win money, it's like, is it really worth it to do it with Zeke? Yes is the answer, but I'm joking around. But play Zeke against the Bengals, right? So Zeke runs for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. They don't have to pass a lot. Bengals defense does nothing. Boom, 40% of the field gone, right? Not gone, but in worse shape than you are. Then you play the Saints defense, or I have the defense, but play even the Dolphins, who are not going to be there. We're projecting the second highest. Just play anyone else. Literally, just play anyone else. Play the Steelers. The Patriots looked horrible on offense last week, and the Steelers defense was good. Now they lost TJ Watt, but still. Play them, pay up. The Browns are playing the Jets and Joe Flacco, an awesome defense with an awesome defense with an awesome pass rush, and nobody's going to do it because it's like, why would I spend $1,500 more on a defense when the Bengals are there for me at $2,200? So definitely don't always touch on defense, but definitely wanted to touch on the Bengals one because it's just such an important part of the slate. So we've hit Devontae, kind of Derek Carr and the Raiders, a few of the injury, late breaking injuries and injuries that came about yesterday or this week. Let's talk about running back really quickly, because we haven't really touched on a lot of running back outside of maybe some leverage plays or contrarian plays or whatever. Saquon, to me, I totally understand why he's, again, projecting to be the highest owned guy. After him, I think it's pretty wide open as quote unquote, kind of what the best play is. What has kind of stuck out to you from it could just be a player or like how you're approaching the running back position other than Zeke?
I think it's interesting. People's confidence in Darrell Henderson is like zoomed over the last 10 days, right? Like, he's the Rams backup running back. And now, well, he's going to be one of the highest owned running backs on the slate. Like, Cam Akers is still there. And, maybe that's what the Rams took away from the game, or it's something they're thinking about is, well, we're going to need Cam Akers at some point in the season. We can't have him totally not involved. So I think like the projection on Darrell Henderson is much more fragile than you would maybe think. And it's good that he's cheaper, but I think he's going to be very highly owned for someone that I think people's confidence is too much. And I also I mentioned Cooper Kupp, but I think like the Darrell Henderson play seems to imply that all of the Rams touchdowns are going to come on the ground. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think we might see like angry Matthew Stafford, right? The Rams are the Super Bowl champions. They kind of got embarrassed on national television in the kickoff game. It was at home, and now they're playing Atlanta. And I think they're going to score some touchdowns. I don't think they're necessarily all going to come through Darrell Henderson. Like maybe the Rams want to make a statement and it's going to come through the air, like Stafford, Kupp. There's plenty like Allen Robinson's kind of in that same Cam Akers situation where like he just was totally disappeared on national television. They're going to want him at some, like the Rams are thinking about January, right? And like they're thinking about playoffs and they want to get these guys involved. So I think that's something that sticks out to me at running backs. Darrell Henderson might be way too highly owned. We really don't know a lot at this point in the season. And so I think there's no reason for these, for some of these guys to be really highly owned. Saquon does look like he's a big part of the offense. So I don't think you necessarily need to differentiate there. I got Javonte Williams tagged there. Like he's a player that I think is, can be explosive. I didn't realize he was going to be so highly. Yeah.
That's new. That's fairly new.
Yeah. I think I do think Denver will score a lot of points. And so I think it's a good play. He's a guy that can break off 70-yard rushing touchdowns, which is something I want in tournaments. I think we both got Antonio Gibson tagged there. And I think it's a game that's got a pretty high point total. It's being overlooked a little bit. And he's the guy in Washington. And like it's ironic or it's just an odd situation. Brian Robinson looks good, thank goodness. But like he was the guy that everybody was talking about. And now but he's on IR and he's not going to play this week. So like Antonio Gibson might not be a guy that I love the rest of the season. He's not a guy that if I had to pick a running back right now for week 12, then I'm necessarily putting in Antonio Gibson. But he's the guy right now, and the team has shown confidence in him in the past in getting the majority of the running back work. And he's also cheap, and he's playing in a game where there's probably going to be some points scored. So I like Antonio Gibson as a differentiator.
Love Antonio Gibson. Honestly, love a lot about Washington, which we'll get to maybe that game in a couple some game stacks and stuff as we start to close out. But I did want to hit running backs. Gibson, definitely agree with every single thing that you said. He also finally, maybe it was a fluke. Maybe it was Carson Wentz over Taylor Heineke in there. I don't know, but 8 targets last week, including some much more creative ways throwing him the football. Anyone who rostered him ever in the past couple years or drafted him in your fantasy league, you've been waiting for the kid who played wide receiver in college to be thrown the ball occasionally. And it only took 2 years. But last week, we finally saw him running some down the field routes, second on the team in targets. Pretty exciting. Now he gets the Lions. I can't honestly figure out why he's projecting for such low ownership. Maybe I'm the fish. I know things can go wrong with J.D. McKissick in the backfield for him, right? If this game goes, maybe the Lions just come out and lay it on Washington here. I'm certainly not expecting that, but maybe it does happen. Things can go south for him because they do still have J.D. McKissick who could catch a bunch of balls. But like, assuming it's just at least reasonably close, he's going to be the early down guy. He is going to get some passing work. He's the goal line back in like the best matchup in football. One of, and you basically have the two guys tagged, which is so fascinating to me. A guy against the Texans and a guy against the Lions, who, yes, they're not going to get 100% of the work like say Saquon is, but like you can't dream of a better matchup. And Javante's ownership has gone up a little bit, but I don't think his ownership's getting away from us to where the point where we have to even really worry about it. And Gibson's definitely isn't. And so like it's like DFS is very hard and complex, but sometimes it's very simple and straightforward. Like play the really good young running backs against the Texans and the Lions. And like by the end of the year, it's probably going to turn out okay. Like you're probably going to be all right, just doing something that simple.
Yeah, and like you said, like guys that can catch passes as well, like those receiving points that, whether even, on FanDuel, it's half point, DraftKings, it's a full point. But every time they get the ball in their hands too, like something can happen. And they can get, 20-yard score receiving, doesn't matter. So I like the guys who can catch passes. I like the guys that are in games that are going to be high scoring. People think they, know from last week how the scores are going to come. And like, I don't necessarily think with the Commanders that Carson Wentz is going to go berserk, and I don't necessarily think that if Russell Wilson is going to get 4 passing touchdowns, it could happen. I don't know why Denver would keep passing the ball if they're up big on Houston, which I think is a strong possibility. So like I think Javonte Williams could get a lot of work. That's probably guaranteeing like a 2-touchdown Melvin Gordon game, but it's something that I think is a good way to play tournaments this week.
Yep, I totally agree. Just to hit a couple, won't deep dive on any of this because we've kind of talked about our favorite tournament plays at running back. But just to hit on a couple guys that I find super interesting for tournaments. Again, I did the Roto Underworld show with Matt Kelly, and he was like talking about putting his, they're like an analytics website, and he's like, but I had to put my film grinder hat on for a second. He's like, did you watch Cordero Patterson run last week against that Saints defense that we're talking about has been so good for such a long time? He looked incredible, and we know Atlanta, to their detriment, will probably continue to run the ball, but I do think it's a good way for them to attack the Rams. We know CPAT also catches passes. He's only 6K and low owned in a game that we're excited about, right? People aren't necessarily excited about the Falcons, but everybody's excited for Henderson, Kupp, Higbee, A-Rob, right? Everybody's excited for that. So if the Rams are going to score a bunch of points, we talked about Mariota. I like CPAT as well. James Conner to me is maybe a little more of a fun is not the right word. More I don't know, less exciting, but I could see the ceiling case as your bring back to a Raider stack, right? If Carr really is just going to light it up and they can just hang in there. Connor got all the running back work until that game got out of hand last week. And then Eno started to come in the third quarter. But if they can hang in there, we saw Connor have 3 touchdown games last year and he gets all the passing down work. But we've kind of, again, like you said, we feel like we know that the Cardinals are just so bad that we're like lower on them this week than even just last week we were. And like the Chiefs are awesome. The Chiefs are really good. Like maybe it was just the Chiefs, not necessarily the Cardinals. Again, not saying I believe that, but I'm saying that could be the case. And then I really kind of like Jeff Wilson, which is not something I would normally say, probably a little bit more of a FanDuel play. But when's the last time like we had a 49ers like lead running back for crazy, crazy cheap against one of the worst teams in the NFL? And nobody was playing him, right? Eli Mitchell, if Eli Mitchell was 5K this week, he would be very popular. But I guess we're just not giving Jeff Wilson that work, which I can understand. There's some uncertainty, but I think it's fairly clear he's going to be the lead back. We've also seen 3 touchdown Jeff Wilson games before. So he's kind of interesting to me too.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Jeff Wilson's a guy that, especially on FanDuel, sticks out to me because I think it's exactly what you said. Like if Eli Mitchell was his price, he'd be the only thing people were talking about. It's a difficult play because like we think about Deebo Samuel and we think about Trey Lance, and we don't know exactly how all of that is going to break down, but it could break down in Jeff Wilson's favor as well. I know, he's sitting there with single-digit ownership. So he's a player like. there's another game I don't think we've talked about at all. And like when you mentioned the Chiefs, I started thinking about it. It's like this the Miami-Baltimore game. I think is going to be overlooked entirely, and I think it's a game that like it doesn't have the highest point total, but we probably, like, Dobbins is out. It's a game that scores very well for DFS purposes, right? Like with Lamar Jackson, and I've got some tournament lineups with like that are like Lamar Jackson with like Dolphins, Ravens stacks. So it's like there's nothing at the tight end position this week. So, but it could be like a Mark Andrews week, right? He's the guy that I think is most likely to like just absolutely run away the tight end position with a couple of touchdowns, or it could come from Lamar Jackson touchdowns. Chase Edmonds is really well priced. And if let's say Baltimore has got a lead, Edmonds is a guy that can catch passes. So like he's in there with a Dolphins bring back, and then Tyreek Hill can always go absolutely berserk. And we don't know a lot about this Miami offense yet. And we don't know a lot about like this Baltimore defense yet. Like, so, and I think people see Baltimore defense and they maybe think of a few years ago of like really grinding it out, like grinding out the clock, really tough to score points on. I don't think it's that same Baltimore defense this year. So like Baltimore could be in some shootouts, and it wasn't necessarily that way last year, but I still think people just think of that in their heads of, like they see at Baltimore, they think like, oh, the Ravens defense is going to dominate. I don't know. Like this game might be one of the higher scoring games that nobody's expecting.
I totally agree. It's another one we talked about this week where it has all the, if you just like remove the, like you said, kind of the sentiment around both teams, right? Everybody hates Tua because he has a weak arm, right? Noodle arm Tua is a laughing stock of Twitter. The Ravens, have been historically a run heavy team. They're historically a really good defensive team. Miami looked good on defense in week 1. This feels, it's not a super high total, but it has everything from like when it hits, you win. Like, I'm not saying that it's going to hit because it's right. It's a probabilistic game that we're playing. Most likely the scenario is not that this game has a bunch of long touchdowns and shoots out, but when Tyreek breaks free for those 2 long ones in the first half, or Lamar, escapes pressure and runs for a 60-yard touchdown. Bateman, who had a long touchdown last week, catches another long touchdown, right? Like you said, Chase Edmonds, very cheap for a 1A running back who catches passes. Anything can happen with this type of a game, I think. And the most likely scenario, right, is 24 or 20 or whatever, which is what the total is at. But if these superstars, Tyreek, Lamar, Mark Andrews, etc., Jalen Waddle, who, I mean, absolutely no one's playing Jalen Waddle this week, who is also interesting in stacks. But these guys can blow up games, and we don't see it coming. And you look back at the end and you're like, well, yeah, it was Tyreek Hill and Lamar Jackson. Of course, they scored 40 fantasy points, but right now it doesn't feel that way. And so I very much like that game. Last couple of minutes here, I want to talk about a couple games because we didn't touch a ton of wide receivers because we can't cover everything in 50 minutes, but maybe some other games that you're kind of looking at to either stack or maybe, some secondary correlations, that kind of stuff. One that stuck out to me when I was thinking about your Zeke thing, that is an interesting, neither of those Bengals wide receivers are going to be particularly, sorry, Tyler Boyd. When I talk about the Bengals wide receivers, I'm talking about Jamar Chase and T Higgins, though neither of those guys are going to be owned. And if something does happen where like the Cowboys can be competent, score some points, maybe Zeke does have the 100 yards and a touchdown. I mean, Chase and Higgins unowned seems really fun. Seems pretty fun to me. And then the other one, I really like DJ Moore as a run back to Saquon Barkley. DJ Moore's probably my favorite wide receiver play of the week. I think he matches up really well with the Giants, the way they like to bring a lot of pressure, should be in a lot of one-on-one. I'm going to be tilting my face off watching Baker Mayfield overthrows later, so we can just go ahead and chalk that one up that I'm going to be mad after the game. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for DJ Moore, and he's kind of in this mid 5K range where he's way too talented for that, but he didn't have a very good week 1, so nobody's really jumping on.
Yeah, I like DJ Moore a lot. I think that Giants Panthers game is going to be overlooked other than Saquon Barkley and to some extent like Christian McCaffrey. But again, that's another game similar to kind of the Miami Baltimore game where it doesn't like it scores very well for DFS. And so yes. I think so like, Barkley, McCaffrey, like I like to shy away from playing two running backs from the same game unless they're both guys who can catch passes, make up a huge amount of the offense. And I think DJ Moore actually has a pretty good matchup against like the zone defense. So I think, like DJ Moore, it's going to be interesting. Like nobody's going to play Baker Mayfield, but I like DJ Moore. I like Christian McCaffrey, so I'm going to have to go there like in a set of 150 lineups. Like got to play something like Baker Mayfield, because again, I think that's a situation we don't know a lot about it. Like we've seen one game that's not necessarily representative. So yeah, play a little bit of Baker Mayfield. We'll see what happens. I think. Yeah, I do think one of the things, and like Daniel Jones is there as well. And I think there's two things that I think it's really difficult for DFS players to get their minds around the math. And like one is like defensive scoring is like for defenses almost not correlated at all to like actual defensive performance as we think of it in the NFL. And then also like running quarterbacks, we really underestimate how many points like running quarterbacks can put up. Like a 20-yard run, like any quarterback can put up a 20-yard run. That's like 50 yards passing. And like, we just might think, quarterback scramble a little bit. Like those points really start to add up. And like, when you look at like Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts, like, how does this guy have so many points? It's like, oh yeah, he's got like 60 yards rushing. It's like an extra 150 passing yards, which we would notice another, 150 passing yards. But like Lamar gets 60 yards rushing, and we don't really think about it that much. It's like that's his rushing prop, right? It's like 58 yards or something like that. So yeah, it's something to think about, like when you're putting in these lineups. So like when I say a game scores well for DFS, like that's oftentimes what I mean is like those rushing yards for the quarterbacks add up.
Yep. Big reason why I'm on Mariota this week is because of that. Exactly. That game scores well for DFS. I know where it's coming from the Rams. There's only a couple options. It ain't going to be Ben Skoranek or Tutu Atwell. I promise you that. I don't have to worry about it. And on the Falcons side, honestly, it's only a couple of guys, and you have one of the highest run rate quarterbacks in the league, probably chasing points. To wrap up, I did just want to say Cam is in the chat asking about Taysom. I'm glad we touched on Taysom, but it was interesting. While we were on, Jay Glazer came out and said that Jameis has 4 fractures in his back. He's playing, and he's going to play through the pain, but that certainly doesn't make me that didn't read Taysom to me. Sorry, Cam, I love you. That didn't read Taysom to me. That read Bucks, and we already talked about the Saints defense. That read Bucks defense. No Alvin Kamara. Jameis Winston has a broken back, and he's playing against a pretty talented Bucks defense. So that was another, I think, defensive option that we can use. And then somebody did mention, Alex asked about Curtis Samuel. We talked about Gibson, who I really love, but I love all the Washington guys. Everyone on Washington has crazy upside against the Lions, and no one is like really particularly interested in any of them. Gibson, Curtis Samuel was like the original Debo, and then he was like kind of Debo again last week, and nobody gives a shit, because it's Curtis Samuel. He's in this weird 4K range, right? I can just get Ashton Doolin or Greg Dortch for cheaper, but like Curtis Samuel has way more upside, in my opinion, than those guys. Jahan Dotson, all he did was catch 2 touchdowns in his NFL debut, and nobody wants to play him. And Terry McLaurin was the superstar alpha on this team. Even Logan Thomas. We hate tight end. You have a guy going against the Giants, or the Lions that's had a good career. So any last minute, before we get out of here, running a couple of minutes behind, any last minute kind of thoughts, whether that you had coming in or maybe have changed while we've chatted for the last 45 minutes?
No, just that Jameis thing is interesting. I wonder if the Saints will run the ball a little bit more. That makes me like Mark Ingram a little bit more, especially on FanDuel, because he's really cheap. Like if your quarterback's got 4 fractures in his back, I mean, Taysom's there as well. But yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how that offense operates, and it is like that's maybe we want to up the defenses for both teams in that game.
Yep, I like that. My kind of general take was going to be kind of what you said at the beginning, kind of what we talked about a lot at the beginning, is not becoming infatuated with kind of the shiny new toy. The Bucks, right? The guys that the injured teams. Stick with the DJ Moores, right? And the Zeke's and these guys on like offenses, not necessarily Zeke, but these guys that just like were fine plays all along. They didn't benefit from an injury. They're probably in better spots. And we can just stick with those types of guys. and maybe have a little fun with your Marcus Mariotas of the world. That's my guy this week is Marcus Mariota. And I think you'll do just fine, not overreacting to kind of this morning news. So that'll get us out of here. GPP Final Takes week 2. We'll leave it for the crunch time guys and gals to lead you up to lock. They'll hit any of your final questions that we did not hit. And we'll see you guys next week.
In our RotoGrinders, it's the ownership report, week 2, NFL DFS. Let's talk running backs in this video. Let's talk about Saquon Barkley, the man who's going to be clearly one of the top 2 owned running backs on this slate, based on the fact that people saw he had a 62% share of rushing last week to go along with 36% of team receiving targets. Came through with the big-time fantasy point production, and the price is not prohibitive. I think we will see, with the big projections, fantasy points-wise, big ownership on Saquon Barkley. Now, Darrell Henderson is someone who could possibly surpass him based on the fact that his price is lower and his projection is still reasonably high across the DFS industry. However, I do get the sense that there are people who look at this particular situation and say to themselves, is he actually going to be high owned, because of the fact that there is some uncertainty about whether or not he's the true lead back here. I do think that he'll get enough popularity to be among the top 2. Now, you can also look at Javonte Williams, Joe Mixon, Leonard Fournette, all guys who are going to be really popular on this slate. But let's talk about some low-owned guys. Let's talk first about Christian McCaffrey. Not going to be low-owned, but somebody I think is one of the best tournament plays on the slate, even if he's like 11, 12, 13% owned. He's absolutely going to smash in this particular spot, and he is somebody who's not going to be highly owned enough. Scroll down a little bit deeper. Jonathan Taylor, of course, same situation. He's 9,900. However, big upside, and you certainly like the matchup here with Jacksonville. People can't afford him, so that's why he's going to be probably somewhere close to 10% or under on the slate. Chase Edmonds against Baltimore, 5.2. Heavy role in the passing game on PPR sites like DraftKings. You're going to find a lot of value in someone like Chase Edmonds week in and week out, and I think this is a spot where he could do something for your DFS lineups. Finally, Nick Chubb, exact opposite of Chase Edmonds, pure rusher, grinder, who could potentially be really efficient in this matchup against the Jets. Great for this particular spot. Go ahead and try to find some spots for Nick Chubb. He will not be super highly owned. Folks, that's going to do it for the running back video on ownership. Be sure to like and subscribe to this video. Check us out each and every week. We'll be back soon with more positional breakdowns on the ownership report.
What's up, everybody? Week 2 NFL football action. Welcome to RotoGrinders NFL Crunch Time. I'm Justin Carlucci here, along with Kristi Metzger and Andre Alford. What's going on, guys? Good to see you again. How's it going, Andre?
I'm stressed.
All right.
I'm trying to get these. You're going to see me tilt today because I'm going to be trying to get my lineups in. But I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with this Jameis Winston news. But it should be a good week other than that.
Kristi, are you stressed too?
You know, a little bit, but I actually kind of like this slate. I mean, it's kind of turned into a good one, so I can't wait to talk through it with you guys, because there are, for the second week, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of inactives that we maybe weren't expecting. So can't wait to break it down with you guys.
Yeah, definitely drop some questions in our Discord and also in the YouTube channel, and we will definitely get to them. Couple quick plugs we have. Definitely check out scoresandodds.com. A lot of great stuff over there. We got what you need for the NFL season. A lot of new tools and analysis, including Parlay IQ, which is currently free for everybody. You can use that to build optimal same-game parlays based on thousands of game simulated data. Amazing stuff over there. Parlay IQ. Check it out. Scoresandodds.com. Also, you can sign up on FanDuel Sportsbook if you're in a legal betting state. Take advantage of their no-sweat first bet up to $1K. So definitely check that out as well. And crazy slate we have here. It's going to be a good one, I think. It's always fun to play the week 2 like overreactions from week 1 and things like that. So I guess let's just dive right into it, position by position. Let's start with quarterback. And Kristi, I'll throw it over to you since you're less stressed than Andre, I guess, and talk to me about some of these quarterbacks you like today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's going to be some clear chalk today for sure at the quarterback. For one, you've got Derek Carr in a great game environment that is projected to carry some good ownership. You've got Lamar Jackson at the top, who is just a phenomenal play as well. He has rushing upside in a great game. So I think a couple of those guys are going to be pretty chalky options. I think Matthew Stafford, particularly on FanDuel, just a couple $100 more. I think he is a phenomenal play and maybe just a little bit of a pivot away from some of that Derek Carr chalk. So like him quite a bit. On the GPP side, a guy that I think is going to carry not very much ownership, and I looked for him to have a really good bounce back spot is Joe Burrow. That Cincinnati-Dallas game, I think he can put up some big numbers today. I think particular Burrow and Chase are going to go overlooked just because of you've got Cooper Kupp and Devonta Adams carrying a ton of ownership. So those are some of the guys that I like a lot. But I do think, like the Carrs, Lamar Jackson, Stafford, Trey Lance, didn't mention him before too, but I think he's going to be a pretty chalky option as well. And then Kyler Murray too is another one in that game environment on the opposite side that I think, he's always, he puts up fantasy points, just a terrible quarterback in real life. It's hard to watch, but he can certainly put up the points too. So those are some guys that I'm looking at.
Yeah, Dre, any interest in Kyler Murray all the way up top on DK?
I do have some interest, just because I know the game's gonna be a high tempo, high paced game. But I'm getting to him a good amount, but he's not the highest owned quarterback I'm getting to today. I really, really, really like Carson Wentz a lot, like more than I ever expected to like him. I was surprised. Like earlier in the week, I was just like telling my friends, I'm like, am I wrong for liking Carson Wentz so much? And they're just like, no, I have some interest in him too. But I just love him and love this game. Like to see what Detroit did last week with the Eagles. It just gives me the same type of game atmosphere and game vibe, especially from what Carson Wentz did last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars as well. So I like Wentz a lot today. Probably my number one quarterback. I'm going to be well overweight the field on too. I like getting into a lot of like Russell Wilson, just because that's another game that it's going to be a high scoring game that Kristi talked about too. I think they have the highest total or one of the highest totals on the slate as far as just for a team total. So that's going to be people going to probably be on more so on Javonte Williams, which I understand. So Russell Wilson pairing him with Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, or Alberto it's a way to go to me. So I don't mind taking some shots at those guys for sure. I like the Joe Burrow call a lot. I just don't think I'm going to get there a lot of him. I'm concerned with Derek Carr a little bit just because when we were in Chicago last week, I spoke to Kristi about this along with TJ. I was like, Derek Carr has not thrown for more than 2 touchdowns since forever. I went back to even look at last year's stats. It's only been 2 touchdowns, and not the yards has been there. So I don't know how. I would say he has a high floor, but the ceiling is what concerns me. Can he get over that hump of throwing just more than 2 touchdowns? So this one concerns me a little bit about Derek Carr, but I still think he's a great play. And I think Lamar Jackson's going well overlooked too today. I think he's a great option. So I'm going to try to get a little bit overweight on the field too today as well. And I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do with this Jameis Winston situation. That's just kind of hard with the broken back thing. So I'm trying to figure out, do I want to just come in a little bit lower on him and just maybe pivot Wentz to maybe like a guy like more Wentz or some Daniel Jones.
Yeah, interesting late breaking news we had there. Let's just move over to running back just for time purposes here. And we'll definitely get some questions toward the tail end of the show. Jonathan Taylor all the way up top on DraftKings. Then there's a big salary difference between him and Christian McCaffrey. Then there's another salary dip off between Saquon Barkley and the rest of the field here. So Kristi, any interest in either of these 2 high price studs? And then the 7 and 6K range is pretty loaded.
It is. That mid tier is absolutely loaded. I love Saquon Barkley, especially on DraftKings today. He just didn't get the price bump that we saw on FanDuel. So I think he's just a core play. I mean, he looks like the Saquon of old. So, with his price, it's just really hard not to look at him. I do like McCaffrey. I think, he had a bad week last week, so it'll be interesting to see where percentages are. But, he's still Christian McCaffrey. He's healthy. I think he's an awesome tournament play, and he's one that actually I'm looking at a lot on FanDuel, probably a core play for me over there. So like him a ton. Joe Mixon is also one of my favorite guys. I had tagged him last week. He is certainly getting he is so involved in that offense. He played on 73% of the snaps. He's the goal line back. He's just the guy there in another great game environment. So he's just being utilized all over the place. So ton of interest in him. I also think that, you talked a little bit about the New Orleans game. I think Ingram is an interesting play over on FanDuel because he is so low. His price is just $5,200-$5,300. So I think because, you were just talking about Trey, that Winston is banged up. I think they're going to have to rely on the run more. I think it also brings maybe Taysom Hill into some unique opportunities too. And I think on FanDuel, he's certainly an interesting GPP play. But back to kind of some more core plays. Henderson, I think he's going to be, one of the more popular plays. We saw Cam Akers get no really touches that first game out of the chute. So I think Henderson, because of his price, is going to be a great value. I think Josh Jacobs, we like that game a lot. It wouldn't surprise me if Jacobs gets a couple of those touchdowns. And because Adams is carrying such high ownership, I wouldn't be afraid to take a look at him as well. Jonathan Taylor at the top, because he is so expensive and because there's so many great mid-tier opportunities, I think, he's going to maybe go a little bit overlooked, and he's still Jonathan Taylor, could put up 3 touchdowns and absolutely break the slate wide open. So have a ton of interest in him as well. But for me, it's a lot of Saquon, Henderson kind of for cheap, and a lot of Mixon in my lineups this week as well. We talked a little bit about Williams as well, Javonte Williams, and I think he is a great play. I mean, we saw him being utilized. I like the Russell Wilson call by Dre as well, but I also like Williams as running back play. He is going to be pretty popular too. And then maybe just as a couple of GPP plays in there too. Patterson, as long as he's getting the carries, we have him projected at just 6.5% ownership. I think he's a unique play. And then also throw Antonio Gibson in there as well. As long as he's going to be the main guy in there until Brian Robinson comes back, I still think we have to take a look at him while we can.
Yeah, good stuff. Drizzy, over to you, my man. What's up?
Okay, so I like pretty much everyone Kristi mentioned. That's pretty much like my running back pool, pretty much. I really do like Josh Jacobs a lot more now. Just going to try to be at the overweight to him compared to the field, but still get a lot of Devontae Adams as well. So I think I'm going to just make sure I have a lot of him today. This mid range though is really, really strong. Like you said, Saquon being 7,300 on DK is just too low. So I'm gonna have probably the most exposure to him. I really know what also people are forgetting about DeAndre Swift. I know he was listed as injured, like the injury report came out. A little bit skeptical of him, but I still like him a lot today. I'm going to be using a lot of him and Antonio Gibson as well. I think those guys are guys I definitely want to be well over the weight to the field though today, for sure. I like getting to also a guy like Leonard Fournette. It was embarrassing to see my Saints run defense play so horrible last week against Patterson. So I think, especially with the situation in Tampa Bay where you have both their top receivers are out, and Mike Evans will get shut down by Marshawn Lattimore again. Leonard Fournette's going to have to be a guy that's going to be relied on heavily in the passing game and also the running game. So I like getting to a good amount of Leonard Fournette today as well too. I like Javonte Williams as well. I think he's a great option. And I also like getting to the other backup for Javonte Williams, who ran really, really well last week at Melvin Gordon. They both those backs are splitting carries about equally, and they run the ball really, really well and effectively. So I don't mind taking shots on both those guys in tournaments today. And Nick Chubb, who's also going to be low owned going against the Jets, is a very great play in my opinion.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the Cleveland backfield, another team who's splitting carries for the most part. I think the game script will be in favor for Cleveland to run the ball. Nick Chubb quietly at 140 yards, and no one wants to play him against the Jets. Kareem Hunt still coming in pretty low, had a pretty high equity, high touchdown equity game, but still had 15 opportunities between the ground and the air. So I like both Browns backs a lot too, and neither of them are really carrying any ownership at all. On to wide receiver, Kristi. You got Cooper Kupp all the way up top to no surprise, and then a very popular Devontae Adams. So talk to me about the receiver position.
Yeah, I think Devontae Adams is, easily the most popular play on the slate. I mean, 17 targets last game. He's reunited with his college quarterback, playing in front of, if you like the narratives, playing in front of his grandparents today. So, I mean, he's just a very popular play and someone that is a core play. I think there's a lot of ways to get different with still going overweight in Devontae. So someone I like a ton. Cooper Kupp, I actually like on the tournament side, trying to get both Devontae and Cooper Kupp in there because, I mean, they're both great plays. Cooper Kupp checking in a little bit lower ownership just because they are so expensive. And I think the forgotten guy, like we talked about, is going to be Jamar Chase. I mean, the guy's phenomenal too. He could easily put up the same type of numbers, and we have him under 10% ownership right now. So I like all those guys a lot, but I would say, Devontae and Cooper Kupp are certainly high in my player pool this week. Another guy that's going to carry less ownership too is Deebo Samuel. They had a tough week last week in Chicago where it was really rainy, but I think, Deebo is a great tournament play this week for sure. Then kind of in that mid-tier too, you've got, Marquise Brown sitting there in that Las Vegas, Arizona game. I think he's a great bring back on the other side of it. I like both him and Zach Ertz when we get to tight end, but I think he's a great play there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, we've seen him just get tons of targets. So I think that Detroit-Washington game, he's someone that's really a core piece. And then, a guy too that just gets it done, Brandon Cooks, more of a cash game play, but certainly a tournament play as well. I mean, he's just, gets a ton of targets. Great game environment there in Denver. So like him a ton. Looking for some value plays too. Like on FanDuel, Allen Robinson, he's just sitting there at 5,700. You got Hunter Renfrow at 5,600. So you've got some of those guys that are a little bit cheaper. But I think A-Rob, he didn't get much last week, but I really like him in a great bounce back spot this week. And so he's someone I'm targeting heavily. Curtis Samuel is another guy that's really cheap, really on both sites that I think is a really great core piece if you're looking to save some money. And then you've got Greg Dortch, more of a DraftKings play, but he is just 3,500, and we saw him just do a great job last week. And I think again, I wouldn't play him on FanDuel necessarily, but I think on DraftKings, he's a core cash game play and certainly a great tournament play as well. So I would say those guys are some of the guys that I'm looking at the most in my wide receiver player pool.
All right, go ahead, Andre.
Wide receiver. Okay, so this position there's a lot of guys, like Kristi said, especially in the mid range, that I do like a lot. Amon-Ra St. Brown, not getting enough ownership in my opinion, only at 10%. So is Terry McLaurin, who I understand we have guys on that team like Curtis Samuel and what's the other guy's name again? Goodness gracious. I'm blanking for right now. But
Dotson, McLaurin, Logan Thomas. Where's the ball going? It's anyone's guess.
True, but I like McLaurin this spot. We saw what AJ Brown did to this team last week. Like, why are we not on Terry McLaurin to do the same thing to this team this week? He's coming in way too low ownership. I like being like triple the field compared to everyone else on Terry McLaurin. So he's probably like top overall spend today. Top overall like wide receiver I want to get to today. I like Deebo Samuel a lot just for the matchup and the situation in Seattle, going against Seattle and having to do pretty much a little bit of everything. Jalen Waddle's another guy who's not going to get a lot of ownership today, going against a depleted Baltimore secondary who lost three of their starters, like their top three. So I think Waddle has a chance for a big game, and so does Tyreek Hill today as well. Christian Kirk is another great option here for Indy guys that I would love to play well over the field on. Michael Thomas, I think I'm still going to play him a lot, even though we have the situation with Jameis Winston in his back. Going against Tampa Bay, his catch radius is just crazy. He can catch no matter how close the defenders guard him. He won't catch that ball. So I look for him to still have a big game and a short game today with short routes, slants mainly, and comeback routes to the ball. So I think Tom's gonna have a big day today at 5,800, which is still too cheap for him. Another guy that's being overlooked, I think, today is Allen Robinson, the second. I understand he had a bad game last game, but they're going to be playing a lot more man in Atlanta instead of Zoe, which I think, which obviously Zoe got to it. And I looked at the film; 2 targets was still not enough, though. They still found a way to give him the ball. So I think this is a spot where we could potentially have a blow up for Allen Robinson today as well. I don't mind taking some shots on Jarvis Landry too as well. DJ Shark is another little old guy in that Detroit game I do like a lot today. And some of these cheaper receivers, I know we're going to have a lot of ownership on Greg Dortch. I think that's warranted. There's no way to get around that, I feel, because especially with that defense, I think that front seven for Vegas is really good, and they're going to probably bring the pressure to Kyler. So I think that he's going to have to get the ball out quick. So it's going to be mainly, I think, a lot of Dortch and a lot of Zach Ertz. So those are my 2 top targets from that team. I still like Richie James Jr. today, even with Tony playing, because I think Tony's not going to be playing a lot, and he's always getting hurt and injured. So I think that's another good option. Paris Campbell, I like him, but I'm going to be a little bit bullish on him. A little bit at the field on him, maybe a little bit higher compared to everyone else as well, too. And I don't also want to forget about Chris Olave from the New Orleans Saints, who could potentially have a blow-up game. So great young talent that the team drafted, and I think he can still shine here against the Tampa Bay defense as a third receiver.
Yeah, a couple other cheap guys I'm looking at. DJ Moore, bounce back week probably upcoming. I'm thinking here a lot of man coverage that the Giants play. I like Drake London. We'll see what's up with the Rams. Of course, they had Buffalo in the opener, but Drake London super cheap. Decent target share last week. I think he was tied with Kyle Pitts for the team high there. And I do like getting some Jerry Jeudy exposure, especially with that pretty high team total going up against Houston. So let's move on to tight end, about 12:47 p.m. Eastern here. We'll go tight end defense, and then we'll take some questions. So I'll throw it over to you. Kristi, what are you doing at tight end today?
Yeah, so for tight end, I think there's, a couple options. If you're paying up, Mark Andrews obviously is the guy. I mean, he's the guy that Jackson's looking to. So I think he's a great pay up play today. In the mid tier, there's a lot of guys I think that you can really take a look at. I think Kyle Pitts, and thanks for bringing up Drake London. I really like him a lot too. Like you said, both he and Pitts had 7 targets last time, but I think Pitts is in a nice bounce back spot too, and he's priced right. So like him a lot. Higbee, I mean, it's always tough to play him, but he's getting the targets. He's still at a decent price point in a great game environment. So certainly have interest in Tyler Higbee. A guy that's going a little overlooked, and I really like him a lot this week, actually, is Zach Ertz, just because, again, I like that game. And I just think he's just a great bring back option. And so I've got a lot of Ertz, especially on FanDuel this week. Think he's very good. Back to that Bengals game, for some of my correlations there, I'm looking at Dalton Schultz. I know it's kind of an ugly game there for the Dallas side, but I do have some interest there. I think Logan Thomas in that Washington-Detroit game, I think he's a fine play too. And then Juwan Johnson, I think, if you're really punting on DraftKings, is someone that you could take a look at. And then, we talked a little bit about Taysom Hill. I do have some interest in him on FanDuel just because, it would not surprise me to see him get a couple touchdowns in some unique ways. And because he's only 6,200, I do not mind taking a GPP flyer and have a couple of those, especially with all of the injuries and kind of the mess that is the offense right now at the Saints. So definitely have some Taysom interest.
Okay. Yeah. Taysom is certainly a wild card on this slate right now. Andre, you thinking about Taysom? And talk to me about the rest of the tight end position here.
I kind of am, but I'm not sure how much I want to really get to him. Honestly, it's tough, especially on FanDuel. That play I think is really hard to get to for me, just because of who's around him. But I really do like spending up here in this position. I like Mark Andrews a lot. I like Darren Waller to just get a little bit different from Devontae Adams, or even pairing him with Devontae Adams. I like that a lot too. I really also like getting to T.J. Hawkinson, another guy that Detroit Washington game, which I'm really high on, who's getting overlooked here in this spot too. And Tyler Higbee is another guy I'm looking at too today, and Logan Thomas, besides also Alberto, who I mentioned earlier. You're muted.
Man, I don't know if you watched Thursday Night Showdown show, but we had a competition between my mutes and how many times TJ interrupted me, and it was. I guess we can add one more mute to the list. I know Steve's probably keeping track somewhere. Anyway, 12:50 p.m. Eastern here. Let's talk some defense because it's. Thank you. Because it's getting interesting with the Jameis news. I don't know. What do you think about the Buccaneers, Kristi, and any other defenses you're targeting today?
Yeah, so I mean, before we got some of this news, kind of talking about the Bucs and Saints, I think the Bengals are checking in to be the most popular just because they're so cheap on DraftKings, and they correlate well with Joe Mixon. So I think they were going to carry a lot of ownership. Still like them a lot, but because defenses, I mean, as in general, we're pretty bad at picking defenses. So I like, finding some different options out there that the field isn't on. So some that I like, I do like the Saints defense now, and I think you could play the Bucs defense too, just with how messy that game could be. But I do think a good pivot, especially on FanDuel, is going to the Saints D, maybe pairing them with Ingram or something like that. But another team I have a lot of interest in are the Patriots defense. I mean, I think they come back in a big bounce back spot. I think they could get some defensive plays, maybe even a touchdown. So I'm kind of pivoting to them. I think they're a good play that I like. I would also throw, I think you could put the Dolphins in there. They were really the high scoring D last week. They obviously have a good defensive unit. I think they're a fine play. And then maybe on the high end, we talked a little bit about liking Nick Chubb as a GPP play. I think that the Browns and the Broncos are some high-end defenses. But for me, I'm probably looking to save this week, and it's kind of Patriots. I do like the Bengals, like I said, but then the Saints, too, I think are someone I like a lot more.
Yeah, I have the Patriots plugged into my single entry team right now. I think they're on FanDuel. They're pretty cheap, so that helped me get what I need. Andre, defense, and then we'll take some questions.
Patriots is a good one that I found myself getting a lot of now. I do like the Jacksonville Jaguars defense still, because they beat that team last year, and I called it in week 18, 17, whatever it was, and that defense showed up, and that defense is not bad. They have a good young front seven, so I don't mind taking a shot at them, and they're a way to get off of the Bengals defense, who are going to be very popular today. I love the Saints defense as well. I think they're in a good position. The Steelers, pretty much anyone at this low end. And if I'm going to spend up, I do like getting just to the Browns. I think the Browns have a real good shot today to be really good, and also the Dolphins.
I like it. We're getting closer to lock here. 12:52 Eastern. Let's start taking some questions. DK Cash, I'll start with you, Dre. DK Cash, Derek Carr and Jawan Johnson, or Carson Wentz and OJ Howard?
It's going to be Derek Carr.
Okay. Kristi, over to you. Oh, wait. It's a me question. Wow, someone tagged me. All right, JMVP, DK Cash, Fournette or St. Brown in the flex? Man, I expect Fournette to get some more touches now for sure. But I'm taking St. Brown in that game environment. That's my pick there. Couple other questions I'm putting together here. A defense question, Kristi. New Orleans defense or Baltimore defense today? What do you got?
I'm going with the Saints D. I like them a lot.
Okay. Andre, FanDuel Cash. Pick one of these tight ends. Albert O, Tyler Higbee, or Zach Ertz?
If it Cash?
Yes.
Albert O.
Okay. DK Cash, Kristi. Paris Campbell and St. Brown, or Doolin and Tyreek?
I take the first one.
All right. Pick two for Cash, Dre. I guess it's any two of these running backs. Antonio Gibson, Joe Mixon, Barkley, McCaffrey, or Javonte Williams?
Barkley definitely. Probably it's tough. I'm gonna say Javonte personally, but I don't see you probably go with Joe Mixon either. And Cat.
All right. Let's see. Kristi, over to you. FanDuel Cash. Would you play the Julio replacement? I'm assuming we're talking Russell Gage here.
That's what he's saying. Or should play that.
Asking, should he play Russell Gage? I'm assuming for FanDuel Cash. What do you think about Russell Gage?
I don't know if I do him for cash. I think at the same price point, I would even look at Allen Robinson. I like him more so over Gage, but I mean, I would save Gage more for tournaments.
Okay. Dre, over to you. Saquon and Curtis Samuels or Jahan Dotson and James Conner?
You said Saquon, Curtis Samuel, or who?
I'm assuming it's Curtis Samuels, yeah, or Jahan Dotson and James Conner.
Probably the second one. Yeah, the second one.
Okay. Who do you start in season long, Kristi? Allen Robinson or Gabe Davis?
Well, it's tough because, I mean, I would definitely say Gabe Davis if he wasn't hurt, but I know he's got a questionable tag. I mean, if Gabe's going to play, I would definitely do Gabe.
Okay. Favorite stacks? I'll ask both of you. Dre, some stacks you're looking at today.
Give me Carson. Give me like the Washington stack with Carson Wentz. Give me him with McLaurin.
Okay. Kristi, favorite stacks today for tournaments?
Yeah, I still obviously really like the Carr, Adams, and that whole game stack. But what I think is going to be a little bit underowned is I like the Stafford Cup side of it and trying to even get Adams in there. So give me the Rams.
Yeah, I like Cup. Really expensive on FanDuel. Everyone's going to go Devontae Adams. So I think that's an interesting stack as well.
All right, can you give her? I gotta get my lineups in. I didn't realize what time was just now.
Oh yeah, 12:56, man. Get him in there. FanDuel single entry, Kristi. Barkley and DJ Moore, or Darrell Henderson and Devontae Adams.
Darrell Henderson, Devontae Adams.
Okay, I'll go right back to you, Kristi, since Andre's stressed. Any merit in playing both McCaffrey and Barkley in the same lineup?
I think that's a great idea. In fact, I know I have one of them in my three main lineups that has that. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, we know the whole running back thing doesn't always positively correlate, but they are like the premier receiving backs in the NFL.
They are. They really are.
I think it's okay. FanDuel Cash. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, it's a 3v3. Pitts and Mixon and DJ Moore and the Bengals defense. Oh man, it's like half a lineup here. I don't know. Pitts, Mixon, DJ Moore. The players don't add up. I'm gonna have to come back to that. See if you can figure out Rip and Sippin in the chat. FanDuel Cash, punt Cincy or down to Jacksonville if you want to get Taysom Hill. So, yeah.
I don't mind Jacksonville. You know, Dre mentioned them too. I think they're an interesting punt for sure. If it gets you Taysom, I think the upside is certainly there. So yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I got it now. So here we go. FanDuel Cash. Kyle Pitts, Joe Mixon, DJ Moore, Bengals defense. Or Zach Ertz, Devontae Adams, Brandon Cooks, Patriots defense.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, they're both really good. I think I'd actually go that second one. I like the one with Ertz in there too, and Patriots defense. Yeah, and Adams. Yeah, I think I'd go the second one.
I think Adams is a deal breaker for me for cash. Adams is probably like the first guy in cash builds. I
think he is. I think you have to have him in cash builds for sure. Yep.
Yeah, I tend to agree. 12:58. Start hitting that save button. I'm talking to you too, Andre. Make sure you're getting them in there. It's like an NBA adrenaline rush for you sometimes when you're doing shit.
I do this too much. I thought it would I'm like, okay, I'll make an effort to get my lineups in like 30 beforehand. I can't do it. It's just so hard.
No, I totally get it. Yeah, any hot takes for today, guys? Give me something. Andre, I know you're full of hot takes, so let me hear something.
Oh, well, I'm taking down a Millie today. That's number one on both sites.
I love it.
I hope you do.
I hope you do too.
That'll be amazing. But I think honestly, a Wentz stack wins it all. but I think that Detroit game is just going well overlooked. Like, not enough pieces in there are getting old like I thought they would be at the beginning of the week. So I think that game shoots out, and I think that that's what takes out the Billy today.
Kristi, any hot takes?
I really like Allen Robinson and a huge bounce back. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to see him get a touchdown today. Everyone overlooking him because he didn't do much last week, and he's still talented. So I really like him today.
Hey, real quick, Derek Carr or Trey Lance? Single entry tournament.
Derek Carr.
Derek Carr for me too.
There you go, Desmond. Hopefully you get that in real quick. 12:59. Hit that submit button. Save them. Get them in. I'm ready for another week of football. It's going to be fun. That Miami-Baltimore game is kind of low-key interesting right off the bat at 1 o'clock.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll see how the Miami Tua Tyreek connection really pans out here. We are at 1 p.m. locked, folks. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Anything else before we get out of here?
Good luck to everyone. I hope y'all come in first place in the contest. I'm not playing it, and I hope everyone makes money today.
It's gonna be a good week. I can feel it. It's gonna be good.
Definitely. Check out scoresandodds.com. Dre and Kristi are both doing some free football content for us over there. So definitely excited to have them on board. And definitely check out Parlay IQ over there at scoresandodds.com. So for Dre and Kristi and Steve working the board here, I'm Justin. Enjoy and good luck, everybody.